Hello. Hi, everyone. How are we today? Let me get the plant's light turned off. Hold on.
So you're streaming that right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh. I guess her light was not on. Y'all got too many goddamn lights in this bitch. Don't get bitchy with me, Pickle. Alright. That should be better. That's at least a little less aggressive of a lighting. Hello. Hi, everyone. Oh, hey. Okay, so here's the deal. My initial plan was I was going to start a narration of a new novel that is going to be due. The problem, though, is I can't start the narration for that novel because basically when I narrate and it's a duet, meaning there is a male or a female or another person of some variety, and they are supposed to be my other voice, right? So there's me, and then there's another person. What winds up happening is I use this because they have to fill in the dialogue lines. So if I'm narrating, and then there's a partner dialogue line, clicker, right? So I use a dog clicker, and that's what tells, if someone else has to edit it, that's what tells them where that dialogue should go for that chapter. The problem is the book that I would more than likely be trying to start for that is filled with a lot of dialogue with this person's partner. And so I'm going to be clicking the dog clicker every like 2 seconds for lines. And that, I feel like that would drive you guys nuts after a while. So I think I'm going to record that one. Yeah, everybody would wind up clicker trained. So to avoid having everyone clicker trained, I figured it would just be in our best interest to avoid that and maybe look at doing some other stories instead. I know that a lot of you guys really would like to kind of go back to the short creepypasta-esque stories, and I did have some work that needed done for Chilling. So I figured now would be a good opportunity to maybe do that instead. So if you guys are down for it, I think that's what we're going to do. Discord only clicker training narration. I might. That's what I'm saying though, because like I'd be leaned in and I'd be like, and then she picked up the sword in her hand. He said. She smiled. Is that right? She replied. He retorted. And like every 2 seconds, and you guys are going to be like, what is this bitch doing? And then like you're going to start to notice that every time the clicker goes off, like you suddenly feel the need to have a snack. Like I'm not going to do that to you guys. That would be so fucking ridiculous. All right, so we're gonna go back to short horror stories. I had a thing once. Hold on. That'll work. Yo, thank you. I completely forgot that was on. Hold on. Where's my alerts? Gonna move my alerts under here. All right, cool. So let's see. Can I filters? Crop. Okay, let me fix the filter here. There we go. All right. I figure that's a good. I'm not sure why the chat is not up though. It says you guys are, but you're not sure. Oh, there you are. Okay, the chat's up now. Okay, good. All right, let me move all my alerts to my headset because that's going to drive me nuts. There we go. Pando is whatever Pando needs to be. Pando is Susan, and Susan is an alien, and therefore Pando and Susan can be whatever the fuck they want to be. But yes, Susan hates Harrison. That's it. That's the whole story. All right, so let's go ahead and get into some of these narrations. I never did decide on what I was supposed to be using for narration because it's not IRL and I'm technically chatting, but I'm also not. And I thought about moving it to ASMR. Maybe that's what I'll do, but it's not really ASMR. But narration sometimes is ASMR for people. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should I move it to ASMR or should I leave it in just chatting? There's a bit of a robot. Interesting. I wonder. Oh, it might be a crossed cable. Hold on. Let me see. Put that over there. See if that helps. Is that helpful at all? I can't hear it, so. Let me see if I can. How is that? Is that better? It's absolutely cables touching. We had some Subway ASMR. That should have fixed it. Mostly because I moved to my other microphone. I don't know. Yeah, that should be good. I'm just hearing you in my left ear. Oh, well, that would be because hold on. I know what's causing that. Give me a second. Audio. Okay, settings, advanced audio properties. Yeah, you should be good now. That should have fixed it. All right. Yeah, it was set to stereo because I have a setup that I'm getting ready to do for ASMR with my 3DO. Yeah, that should be good now. Okay. Longer volume. I mean the volume's not that low. I'm also speaking at almost a negative 20 decibel, but I'll turn it up for you anyway. It's also the audio is capped at a certain point because I'm going to be reading at a certain level. So is anybody else having lower volume issues besides Maverick? Okay. Yeah, the double XLR one is the one that I have. Okay. So we should be good then. Hello. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and yeah, I turned it up. Thanks, Ellis. I appreciate that. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be narrating some of the stories that are owed for Chilling App. For those of you guys that are not aware, Chilling App is still technically free. You can pay for a subscription if you want to. It just takes away the ads. It's similar to the concept of Spotify, where if you pay for X amount, you don't get ads for X amount, whatever. But yeah, so we're going to be recording some for that. I still occasionally do stories for them, so keep that in mind. But all of the information, of course, is in the bottom of the screen. So we're gonna do this way. Okay. Let's get started. As always, I may periodically disappear for a second because, again, I have to pay attention to what I'm doing for the actual recording portion, so bear with me. But let me see here. All right. Let's do it. Let's do it. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, that sounds good. All right. I don't know anything about these stories. I haven't opened this folder. This is the first time I'm opening this folder. So we're all just going in raw. We're just going in raw. Also, I think I'm going to move to ASMR really quick. I feel like that's the appropriate thing to do for narrations. The whole concept of that is strange to me. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be under when I'm narrating, but seems correct if I'm reading. Okay, let's give that a go. I need to figure out what tags are supposed to be. Okay. Hey, thank you so much. My little alerts is in a bad spot, though. Okay. I'm gonna make this smaller. Because that's just fucking annoying otherwise. Okay. You will soon receive a visit from your long-lost cousin, Susan. Excellent. Thank you for giving Susan a treat. All right, let's get started. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1. That's good to go. All right. Oh, all right. I guess we're starting off with Lovecraft. Fascinating. He might, but I won't go off the fucking rails this time if he does. So. All right, so I won't be able to see the screen after this, just polite reminder. The Silver Key by H.P. Lovecraft. When Randolph Carter was 30, he lost the key of the Gate of Dreams. Prior to that, he had made up for the prosiness? Prosiness? Is that legitimately the word that he used? Prosiness? Hold on. I have to make sure that I'm not prosiness? I mean, it's Lovecraft, actually.
Prosiness.
It is. It's prosiness. That's fucking... All right. Well, we're going to start over because I feel like a dumbass. It's fine. The Silver Key by H.P. Lovecraft. When Randolph Carter was 30, he lost the key of the Gate of Dreams. Prior to that, he had made up for the prosiness of life by nightly excursions to strange and ancient cities beyond space and lovely, unbelievable garden lands across ethereal seas. But as middle age hardened upon him, he felt these liberties slipping away little by little, until at last he was cut off altogether. No more could his galleys sail up the river Ochronos, past the gilded spires of Thran, or his elephant caravans tramp through perfumed jungles in Cled, where forgotten palaces with veined ivory columns sleep lovely and unbroken under the moon. He had read much of things as they are, and talked with too many people.
Well-meaning philosophers had taught him to look into the logical relations of things and analyze the processes which shaped his thoughts and fancies. Wonder had gone away, and he had forgotten that all life is only a set of pictures in the brain, among which there is no difference betwixt those born of real things and those born of inward dreamings, and no cause to value the one above the other. Custom had dinned into his ears a superstitious reverence for that which tangibly and physically exists, and had made him secretly ashamed to dwell in visions. Wise men told him his simple fancies were inane and childish, and he believed it, because he could see that they might easily be so. What he failed to recall was that the deeds of reality are just as inane and childish, and even more absurd, because their actors persist in fancying them full of meaning and purpose, as the blind cosmos grinds aimlessly on from nothing to something, and from something back to nothing again, neither heeding nor knowing the wishes or existence of the minds that flicker for a second, now and then, in the darkness. They had chained him down to things that are, and had then explained the workings of those things till mystery had gone out of the world. When he complained, and longed to escape into twilight realms where magic molded all the little vivid fragments and prized associations of his mind into vistas of breathless expectancy and unquenchable delight, they turned him instead toward the newfound prodigies of science, bidding him find wonder in the atom's vortex and mystery in the sky's dimensions. And when he had failed to find these boons in things whose law are known and measurable, they told him he lacked imagination, and he was immature because he preferred dream illusions to the illusions of our physical creation. So, Carter had tried to do as others did, and pretended that the common events and emotions of earthy minds were more important than the fantasies of rare and delicate souls. He did not dissent when they told him that the animal pain of a stuck pig or a dyspeptic plowman in real life is a greater thing than the peerless beauty of Narath with its 100 carven gates and domes of Chalcedony, which he dimly remembered from his dreams. And under their guidance, he cultivated a painstaking sense of pity and tragedy. Once in a while, though, he could not help seeing how shallow, fickle, and meaningless all human aspirations are, and how emptily our real impulses contrast with those pompous ideals we profess to hold. Then he would have recourse to the polite laughter they had taught him to use against the extravagance and artificially of dreams. Oh, wait, that's an error. Hold on. Then he would have Okay. Then he would have recourse to the polite laughter they had taught him to use against the extravagance and artificiality of dreams, for he saw that the daily of For he saw that the daily life of our world is every inch as extravagant and artificial, and far less worthy of respect because of its poverty and beauty, and its silly reluctance to admit its own lack of reason and purpose. In this way, he became a kind of humorist, for he did not see that even humor is empty in a mindless universe, devoid of any true standard of consistency or inconsistency. In the first days of his bondage, he had turned to the gentle churchly faith endeared to him by the naive trust of his fathers, for thence stretched mystic avenues which seemed to promise escape from life. Only on closer view did he mark the starved fancy and beauty, the stale and prosy triteness, and the owlish gravity and grotesque claims of solid truth which reigned boresomely and overwhelmingly among most of its professors. Or, feel to the full the awkwardness with which it sought to keep alive, as literal fact, the outgrown fears and guesses of a primal race confronting the unknown. It wearied Carter to see how solemnly people tried to make earthly reality out of old myths which every step of their boasted science confuted, and this misplaced seriousness killed the attachment he might have kept for the ancient creeds had they been content to offer the sonorous rites and emotional outlets in their true guise of ethereal fantasy. But when he came to study those who had thrown off the old myths, he found them even more ugly than those who had not. They did not know that beauty lies in harmony, and that loveliness of life has no standard amidst an aimless cosmos, save only its harmony with the dreams and the feelings which have gone before and blindly molded our little spheres out of the rest of chaos. They did not see that good and evil and beauty and ugliness are only ornamental fruits of perspective, whose sole value Oh. Why is this in a Word document? What? Hold on. Damn, I was on a roll. Okay. Whose sole value lies in their linkage to what chance made our fathers think and feel, and whose finer details are different for every race and culture. Instead, they either denied these things altogether or transferred them to the crude, vague instincts which they shared with the beasts and peasants, so that their lives were dragged malodorously out in pain, ugliness, and disproportion, yet filled with a ludicrous pride at having escaped from something no more unsound than that which still held them. They had traded the false gods of fear and blind piety for those of license and anarchy. Carter did not taste deeply of these modern freedoms, for their cheapness and squalor sickened a spirit-loving beauty alone, while his reason rebelled at the flimsy logic with which their champions tried to gild brute impulses with a sacredness stripped from the idols they had discarded. He saw that most of them, in common with their cast-off priestcraft, could not escape from the delusion that life has a meaning apart from that which men dream into it, and could not lay aside the crude notion of ethics and obligations beyond those of beauty, even when all nature shrieked of its unconsciousness and impersonal unmorality in the light of their scientific discoveries. Warped and bigoted with preconceived illusions of justice, freedom, and consistency, they cast off the old lore and the old ways with the old beliefs, nor ever stopped to think that that lore and those ways were the sole makers of their present thoughts and judgments, and the sole guides and standards in a meaningless universe without fixed aims or stable points of reference. Having lost these artificial settings, their lives grew void of direction and dramatic interest, till, at length, they strove to drown their ennui in bustle and pretended usefulness, noise and excitement, barbaric display and animal sensation. When these things palled, disappointed, and grew nauseous through revulsion, they cultivated irony and bitterness, and found fault with the social order. Never could they realize that their brute Never could they realize that their brute foundations were as shifting and contradictory as the gods of their elders, and that the satisfaction of one moment is the bane of the next. Calm, lasting beauty comes only in dream, and this solace the world had thrown away when in its worship of the real, it threw away the secrets of childhood and innocence. Amidst this chaos of hollowness and unrest, Carter tried to live as befitted a man of keen thought and good heritage. With his dreams fading under the ridicule of the age, he could not believe in anything, but the love of harmony kept him close to the ways of his race and station. He walked impassive through the cities of men, and sighed because no vista seemed fully real, because every flash of yellow sunlight on tall roofs and every glimpse of balustraded plazas in the first lamps of evening served only to remind him of dreams he had once known, and to make him homesick for ethereal lands he no longer knew how to find. Travel was only a mockery, and even the Great War stirred him but little, though he served from the first in the Foreign Legion of France. For a while he sought friends, but soon grew weary of the crudeness of their emotions and the sameness and earthiness in their visions. He felt vaguely glad that all his relatives were distant and out of touch with him, for they could not have understood his mental life. That is, none but his grandfather and great-uncle Christopher could, and they were long dead. Then he began once more the writing of books, which he had left off when dreams first failed him. But here, too, was there no satisfaction or fulfillment, for the touch of earth was upon his mind, and he could not think of lovely things, as he had done of yore. Ironic humor dragged down all the twilight minarets he reared, and the earthy fear of improbability blasted all the delicate and amazing flowers in his fairy gardens. The convention of assumed piety split mawkishness on his characters, while the myth of an important reality and significant human events and emotions debased all his high fantasy into thin-veiled allegory and cheap social satire. His new novels were successful, as his old ones had never been, and because he knew how empty they must be to please an empty herd, he burned them and ceased his writing. They were very graceful novels, in which he urbanely laughed at the dreams he slightly sketched, but he saw that their sophistication had sapped all their life away. It was after this that he cultivated deliberate illusion, and dabbled in the notions of the bizarre and the eccentric as an antidote for the commonplace. Most of these, however, soon shewed their poverty and barrenness, and he saw that the popular doctrines of occultism are as dry and inflexible as those of science. Yet, without even the slender palliative truth, palliative. Yet, without even the slender palliative of truth to redeem them, gross stupidity, falsehood, and muddled thinking are not dream, and form no escape from life to a mind trained above their level. So, Carter bought stranger books and sought out deeper and more terrible men of fantastic erudition. So, Carter bought stranger books and sought out deeper and more terrible men of fantastic erudition. Come on, mouth. And more terrible. And sought out deep. There we go. And sought out deeper and more terrible men of fantastic erudition, delving into arcana of consciousness that few have trod, and learning things about the secret pits of life, legend, and immemorial antiquity which disturbed him ever afterward. He decided to live on a rarer plane, and furnished his Boston home to suit his changing moods. One room for each, hung in appropriate colors, furnished with befitting books and objects, and provided with sources of the proper sensations of light, heat, sound, taste, and odor. Just say he was fucking autistic. What do you mean? Like, no, there's a room for each of my moods. I intentionally furnished them not just with colors, but books that were stylistic in accordance to the mood and the... Like, get the fuck out. Sorry. Anyway. Sound, taste, and odor. I'm sorry, but it's true. Just say he's fucking autistic. I am utilizing Adobe Audition for this. It's the one that I had the most comfort for. Free to use is Reaper. And of course there's always Audacity, which is a classic. So this is Howard Phillips. He wasn't good with mental illness. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting back. I'm getting back to it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I had to, like, I was reading that and I'm like, so he's fucking autistic. What do you mean? Like, that's his problem.
Sound.
My man's just wants to live in a fantasy world. Leave him the fuck alone.
An odor.
Once, he heard of a man in the South who was shunned and feared for the blasphemous things he read in prehistoric books and clay tablets smuggled from India and Arabia. Why does it say him, he? That's, okay, I think that's an oversight. He visited, he read, what? Whoever transferred this cut, you know what? Never mind, I'll keep my bitching to myself. He visited, living with him and sharing his studies for 7 years, till horror overtook them one midnight in an unknown and archaic graveyard, and only one emerged where 2 had entered. Then he went back to Arkham, the terrible witch-haunted old town of his forefathers in New England, and had experiences in the dark, amidst the hoary willows and tottering gambrel roofs, which made him seal forever certain pages in the diary of a wild-minded ancestor. But these horrors took him only to the edge of reality, and were not of the true dream country he had known in youth, so that at 50 he despaired of any rest or contentment in a world grown too busy for beauty and too shrewd for dream. Having perceived at last the hollowness and futility of real things, Carter spent his days in retirement, and in wistful, disjointed memories of his dream-filled youth. He thought it rather silly that he bothered to keep on living at all, and got from a South American acquaintance a very curious liquid to take him to oblivion without suffering. Inertia and force of habit, however, caused him to defer action, and he lingered indecisively among thoughts of old times, taking down the strange hangings from his walls and refitting the house as it was in his early boyhood. Purple panes, Victorian furniture, and all. With the passage of time, he became almost glad he had lingered, for his relics of youth and his cleavage from the world made life and sophistication seem very distant and unreal. So much so that a touch of magic and expectancy stole back into his nightly slumbers. For years, those slumbers had known only such twisted Let me guess, garbage guy? Garbage guy. Garbage guy. Garbage guy? Better be the garbage guy. I think it's the garbage guy. All right, I've got to pause for a second. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm not wondering if they included the graveyard story, actually, because it's really interesting. This one specifically is the silver key, and I honestly, I should put... Let me fix that, because I didn't actually have a little thing for narration stuff, so... Okay, let me add a text box. I can't do anything until the dog's finished barking, and that can't be helped because I think it's the oh shit. I think it's the garbage, so bear with me just a second here. Also, I'm wearing pajama pants, don't judge me. Oh, is the dog food here? Oh, you may have to sign for that. Hold on. Guys, hang tight. I got it.
I was in the middle of changing clothes.
Pretty sure he's afraid of dogs. So, fascinating. All right, now narrating. Text. I feel like just putting Lovecraft seems perfectly fucking fine. Like,
When you grabbed the bark thing out of the off the Jeep, where'd you put it? Oh, I'll find it.
it should check by the front door because I wouldn't have taken it far.
Okay.
Where? There we go. Okay. Okay. That's the best I've got. All right, I think we're done finally. I think the dogs are done dogging, so we should be good to go. All right, back to it. Is there not a way that I can like fix my Oh, there we go. That's not really what I meant, but that's fine. Oh yeah, that's how it works. Okay, let me go back to it. So where'd we leave off?
For years, those slumber.
Okay. Okay, back to it. Sorry for the delay, guys. We're back in.
For years, those slumbers had known only such twisted reflections of everyday things as the commonest slumbers know. But now, there returned a flicker of something stranger and wilder, something of vaguely awesome imminence, which took the form of tensely clear pictures from his childhood days, and made him think of little inconsequential things he had long forgotten. He would often awake, calling for his mother and grandfather, both in their graves 1/4 century. Then, one night, his grandfather reminded him of a key. The gray old scholar, as vivid as in life, spoke long and earnestly of their ancient line, and of the strange visions of the delicate and sensitive men who composed it. He spoke of the flame-eyed crusader who learnt wild secrets of the Saracens that held him captive, and of the first and of the and of the first Sir Randolph Carter, who studied magic when Elizabeth was queen. He spoke, too, of that Edmund Carter who had just escaped hanging in the Salem witchcraft, and who had placed in an antique box a great silver key handed down from his ancestors. Before Carter awaked, the gentle visitant had told him where to find that box, that carved oak box of archaic wonder, whose grotesque lid no hand had raised for 2 centuries. In the dust and shadows of the great attic he found it, remote and forgotten at the back of a drawer in a tall chest. It was about 1 foot square, and its Gothic carvings were so fearful that he did not marvel no person since Edmund Carter had dared to open it. It gave forth no noise when shaken, but was mystic with the scent of unremembered spices. That it held a key was indeed only a dim legend, and Randolph Carter's father had never known such a box. That it held a key. There we go. Okay. That it held a key was indeed only a dim legend, and Randolph Carter's father had never known such a box existed. It was bound in rusty iron, and no means was provided for working the formidable lock. Carter vaguely understood that he would find within it some key to the lost gate of dreams, but of where and how to use it, his grandfather had told him nothing. An old servant forced the carven lid, shaking as he did so at the hideous faces leering from the blackened wood, and at some unplaced familiarity. Inside, wrapped in a discolored parchment, was a huge key of tarnished silver covered with cryptical arabesques, but of any legible explanation there was none. The parchment was voluminous. There was none. Voluminous. But of any legible But of any legible explanation there was none. The parchment was voluminous and held only the strange hieroglyphs of an unknown tongue written with an antique reed. Carter recognized the characters as those he had seen on a certain papyrus scroll belonging to that terrible scholar of the South who had vanished one midnight in a nameless cemetery. The man had always shivered when he read this scroll, and Carter shivered now. But he cleaned the key and kept it by him nightly in its aromatic box of ancient oak. His dreams were meanwhile increasing in vividness, and though shewing him none of the strange cities and incredible gardens of the old days, were assuming a definite cast whose purpose could not be mistaken. They were calling him back along the years, and with the mingled wills of all his fathers were pulling him towards some hidden and ancestral source. Then he knew he must go into the past and merge himself with old things, and day after day he thought of the hills to the north where haunted Arkham and the rushing Miskatonic and the lonely rustic homestead of his people lay. In the brooding fire of autumn, Carter took the old remembered way past graceful lines of rolling hill and stone-walled meadow, distant vale and hanging woodland, curving road and nestling farmstead, and the crystal windings of the Miskatonic, crossed here and there by rustic bridges of wood or stone. At one bend, he saw the group of giant elms among which an ancestor had oddly vanished a century and a half before, and shuddered as the wind blew meaningly through them. Then there was the crumbling farmhouse of old Goody Fowler the witch, with its little evil windows and great roof sloping nearly to the ground on the north side. He speeded up his car as he passed it, and did not slacken till he had mounted the hill where his mother and her fathers before her were born, and where the old white house still looked proudly across the road at the breathlessly lovely panorama of rocky slope and verdant valley, with the distant spires of Kingsport on the horizon, and hints of the archaic, dream-laden sea in the farthest background. Then came the steeper slope that held the old Carter place he had not seen in over 40 years. Afternoon was far gone when he reached the foot, and at the bend halfway up, he paused to scan the outspread countryside, golden and glorified in the slanting floods of magic poured out by a western sun. All the strangeness and expectancy of his recent dreams seemed present in this hushed and unearthly landscape. And he thought of the unknown solitude of other planets as his eyes traced out the velvet and deserted lawns shining undulant between their tumbled walls, the clumps of fairy forests setting off far lines of purple hills beyond hills, and the spectral wooded valley dipping down in shadow to dank hollows where trickling waters crooned and gurgled among swollen and distorted roots. Something made him feel that motors did not belong in the realm he was seeking, so he left his car at the edge of the forest, and putting the great key in his coat pocket, walked on up the hill. Woods now engulfed him utterly, though he knew the house was on a high knoll that cleared the trees except to the north. He wondered how it would look, for it had been left vacant and untended through his neglect since the death of his strange great-uncle Christopher 30 years before. In his boyhood, he had reveled through long visits here, and had found weird marvels in the woods beyond the orchard. In his boyhood, he had reveled through long visits there, and had found weird marvels in the woods beyond the orchard. Shadows thickened around him, for the night was near. Once a gap in the trees opened up to the right, so that he saw off across leagues of twilight meadow and spied the old congregational steeple on Central Hill in Kingsport, pink with the last flush of day, the panes of the little round windows blazing with reflected fire. Then, when he was in deep shadow again, he recalled with a start that the glimpse must have come from childish memory alone, since the old white church had been long torn down to make room for the Congregational Hospital. He had read of it with interest, for the paper had told about some strange burrows or passages found in the rocky hill beneath. Through his puzzlement, a voice piped, and he started again at its familiarity after long years. Old Benijah Corey had been his Uncle Christopher's hired man, and was aged even in those far-off times of his boyhood visits. Now he must be well over 100, but that piping voice could come from no one else. He could distinguish no words, yet the tone was haunting and unmistakable. To think that old Benji should still be alive. Mr. Randy, where be ya? Do you want to scare your Aunt Marthy plumb to death? Ain't she told you to keep the night place in the afternoon and get back after dark? Randy! He's the beatenest boy for running off into the woods I ever see, half the time a settin' morning round to snake den in the upper timber lot. Hey, Randy! Randolph Carter stopped in the pitch darkness and rubbed his hand across his eyes. Something was queer. He had been somewhere he ought not to be, had strayed very far away to places where he had not belonged, and was now inexcusably late. He had not noticed the time on the Kingsport steeple, though he could easily have made it out with his pocket telescope. But he knew his lateness was something very strange and unprecedented. He was not sure he had his little telescope with him, and put his hand in his blouse pocket to see. No, it was not there. But there was the big silver key he had found in a box somewhere. Uncle Chris had told him something odd once about an old, unopened box with a key in it, but Aunt Martha had stopped the story abruptly, saying it was no kind of thing to tell a child whose head was already too full of queer fancies. He tried to recall just where he had found the key, but something seemed very confused. He guessed it was in the attic at home in Boston, and dimly remembered bribing Parks with half his week's allowance to help him open the box and keep quiet about it. But when he remembered this, the face of Parks came up very strangely, as if the wrinkles of long years had fallen upon the brisk little cockney. "Randy! Randy! Aye, aye, Randy!" A swaying lantern came around the black bend, and old Benjy pounced on the silent and bewildered form of the pilgrim. "Durn ye, boy, so there ye be, ain't ye got a tongue in your head? That ye can't answer a body. I've been calling this half an hour, and ye must ha' heard me long ago. Don't you know your Aunt Marthy's all a fidgeting over you being off after dark? Wait till I tell your Uncle Chris when he gets 'em. You'd oughter know these woods ain't no fittin' place to be traipsin' this hour. These things abroad what don't know nobody no good, as my grandson knowed for me. Come, Mr. Randy, or Hannah won't keep you supper no longer." So Randolph Carter was marched up the road where wondering stars glimmered through high autumn boughs, and dogs barked as the yellow light of small-paned windows shone out at the farther turn, and the Pleiades twinkled across the open knoll where a great gambrel roof stood black against the dim west. Aunt Martha was in the doorway, and did not scold too hard when Benjy shoved the truant in. She knew Uncle Chris well enough to expect such things of the Carter blood. Randolph did not show his key, but ate his supper in silence, and protested only when bedtime came. He sometimes dreamed better when awake, and he wanted to use that key. In the morning, Randolph was up early, and would have run off to the upper timber lot if Uncle Chris had not caught him and forced him into his chair by the breakfast table. He looked impatiently around the low-pitched room with the rag carpet and exposed beams and corner posts, and smiled only when the orchard boughs scratched at the leaded panes of the rear window. The trees and the hills were close to him, and formed the gates of that timeless realm which was his true country. Then he was free. He felt in his blouse pocket for the key, and, being reassured, skipped off across the orchard to the rise beyond, where the wooded hill climbed again to heights above even the treeless knoll. The floor of the forest was mossy and mysterious, and great lichened rocks rose vaguely here and there in the dim light like druid monoliths among the swollen and twisted trunks of a sacred grove. Once in his ascent, Rudolph crossed a rushing stream whose falls a little way off sang runic incantations to the lurking fauns and agapans and dryads. Then he came to the strange cave in the forest slope, the dreaded snake den, which country folk shunned, and away from which Benjy had warned him again and again. It was deep, far deeper than anyone but Randolph suspected, for the boy had found a fissure in the farthermost black corner that led to a loftier grotto beyond. That led to a loftier grotto beyond, a haunting sepulchral place whose granite walls held a curious illusion of conscious artifice. On this occasion, he crawled in as usual, lighting his way with matches filched from the sitting-room match-safe, and edging through the final crevice with an eagerness hard to explain, even to himself. He could not tell why he approached the farther wall so confidently, or why he instinctively drew forth the great silver key as he did so. But on he went, and when he danced back to the house that night, he offered no excuses for his lateness, nor heeded in the least the reproofs he gained for ignoring the noontide dinner horn altogether. Now it is agreed by all the distant relatives of Randolph Carter that something occurred to heighten his imagination in his 10th year. His cousin, Ernest B. Aspinwall, Esquire, of Chicago, is fully 10 years his senior, and distinctly recalls a change in the boy after the autumn of 1883. Randolph had looked on scenes of fantasy that few others can ever have beheld, and stranger still were some of the qualities which he shewed in relations to very mundane things. He seemed, in fine, to have picked up an odd gift of prophecy, and reacted unusually to things which, though at the time without meaning, were later found to justify the singular impressions. In subsequent decades, as new inventions, new names, and new events appeared one by one in the book of history, people would know. I think it was supposed to be now. People would now and then recall wonderingly how Carter had years before let fall some careless word of undoubted connection with what was then far in the future. He did not himself understand these words, or why certain things made him feel certain emotions, but fancied that some unremembered dream must be responsible. It was as early as 1897 that he turned pale when some traveler mentioned the French town of Belloy in Santerre, and friends remembered it when he was almost mortally wounded there in 1916, while serving with the Foreign Legion in the Great War. Carter's relatives talk much of these things because he has lately disappeared. His little old servant, Parks, who for years bore patiently with his vagaries, last saw him on the morning he drove off alone in his car with a key he had recently found. Parks had helped him get the key from the old box containing it, and had felt strangely affected by the grotesque carvings on the box, and by some other odd quality he could not name. When Carter left, he had said he was going to visit his old ancestral country around Arkham. Halfway up Elm Mountain, on the way to the ruins of the old Carter place, they found his motor set carefully by the roadside, and in it was a box of fragrant wood with carvings that frightened the countryman who stumbled on it. The box held only a queer parchment whose characters no linguist or paleographer has been able to decipher or identify. Rain had long effaced any possible footprints, though Boston investigators had something to say about evidences of disturbances among the fallen timbers of the Sorry. Oof. Though Boston investigators had something to say about evidences of disturbances among the fallen timbers of the Carter place. It was, they averred, as though someone had groped about the ruins at no distant period. A common white handkerchief found among forest rocks on the hillside beyond cannot be identified as belonging to the missing man. There is talk of apportioning Randolph Carter's estate among his heirs, but I shall stand firmly against this course because I do not believe he is dead. There are twists of time and space, of vision and reality, which only a dreamer can divine. And from what I know of Carter, I think he has merely found a way to traverse these mazes. Whether or not he will ever come back, I cannot say. He wanted the lands of dreams he had lost and yearned for the days of his childhood. Then he found a key, and I somehow believe he was able to use it to strange advantage. I shall ask him when I see him, for I expect to meet him shortly in a certain dream city we both used to haunt. It is rumored in Ulthar, beyond the river sky, that a new king reigns on the opal throne in Ilikvad, that fabulous town of turrets atop the hollow cliffs of glass, overlooking the twilight sea, wherein the bearded and finny Nori build their singular labyrinths. And I believe I know how to interpret this rumor. Certainly I look forward impatiently to the sight of that great silver key, for in its cryptical arabesques there may stand symbolized all the aims and mysteries of a blindly impersonal cosmos. You know, I've never actually read that one. A croftier lotto, yeah. Aw, thanks. So yeah, that was the Silver Key. Of course, that was a Lovecraft story. So that's the first of the grouping that we got. It's not often that I get to read stories written in that manner. So that was actually really interesting. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my interpretation of it. Again, I know it's a bit different than usual, but hopefully it was fun to listen to. So, yeah.
The next one is a Brothers Grimm story, so let's see how that goes. Thanks. Yeah, some of the, I do admit, like I did get a little tongue fucked on some of the work, but that's not so bad. Of course. Thank you. All right. So this next one is a Brothers Grimm story, which is always interesting. I kind of wish... So this is the kind of stuff that I was really looking to try to use my VTuber for, but unfortunately, because I record on my Mac, I don't know how that's going to work. So I've got to figure out, because I don't think I can do it from my phone. I guess I could look. I think I have to send it from my computer to my phone, though, because I think my phone still has to be on, so I'll have to figure that out. I'll do that some other day, though. So for now, you just have to deal with my face and my weird mouth moving at weird times. Okay, next story. Let's do it. If my computer was quieter, it would be a different conversation, but unfortunately tis not quiet, which is fine. Maybe I'll look at how to do that some other time. Working on it. Hang tight, guys. Okay. All right, next story. You say that. The Poor Man and the Rich Man by the brother... Fuck. But... All right, let me adjust here. The Poor Man and the Rich Man by the Brothers Grimm. In olden times, when the Lord himself still used to walk about on this earth amongst men, it once happened that he was tired and overtaken by the darkness before he could reach an inn. Now there stood on the road before him 2 houses facing each other, the one large and beautiful, the other small and poor. The large one belonged to a rich man, and the small one to a poor man. Then the Lord thought, I shall be no burden to the rich man. I will stay the night with him. When the rich man heard someone knocking at his door, he opened the window and asked the stranger what he wanted. The Lord answered, I only ask for a night's lodging. Then the rich man looked at the traveler from head to foot, and as the Lord was wearing common clothes and did not look like one who had much money in his pocket, he shook his head and said, No, I cannot take you in. My rooms are full of herbs and seeds, and if I were to lodge everyone who knocked at my door, I might soon go begging myself. Go somewhere else for a lodging. And with this, he shut down the window and left the Lord standing there. So the Lord turned his back on the rich man and went across to the small house and knocked. He had hardly done so when the poor man opened the little door and bade the traveler come in. Pass the night with me. It is already dark, said he. You cannot go any further tonight. This pleased the Lord, and he went in. The poor man's wife shook hands with him and welcomed him and said he was to make himself at home and put up with what they had got. They had not much to offer him, but what they had they would give him with all their hearts. Then she put the potatoes on the fire, and while they were boiling, she milked the goat that they might have a little milk with them.
When the cloth was laid, the Lord sat down with the man and his wife, and he enjoyed their coarse food, for there were happy faces at the table. When they had had supper, and it was bedtime, the woman called her husband apart and said, "Hark you, dear husband, let us make up a bed of straw for ourselves tonight, and then the poor traveler can sleep in our bed and have a good rest, for he has been walking the whole day through, and that makes one weary." "With all my heart," he answered. "I will go and offer it to him." And then he went to the stranger and invited him, if he had no objection, to sleep in their bed and rest his limbs properly. But the Lord was unwilling to take their bed from the two older folks. However, they would not be satisfied until at length he did it, and lay down in their bed, while they themselves lay on some straw on the ground. Next morning, they got up before daybreak and made as good a breakfast as they could for the guest. When the sun shone in through the little window, and the Lord had gotten up, he again ate with them, and then prepared to set out on his journey. But as he was standing at the door, he turned round and said, "As you are so kind and good, you may wish 3 things for yourselves, and I will grant them." Then the man said, "What else should I wish for but eternal happiness, and that we, too, as long as we live, may be healthy and have every day our daily bread? For the 3rd wish I do not know what to have." And the Lord said to him, "Will you wish for a new house instead of this old one?" "Oh, yes," said the man. "If I can have that too, I should like it very much." And the Lord fulfilled his wish, and changed their old house into a new one, again gave them his blessing, and went on. The sun was high when the rich man got up and leaned out of his window and saw, on the opposite side of the way, a new, clean-looking house with red tiles and bright windows, where the old hut used to be. He was very much astonished, and called his wife and said to her, "Tell me what can have happened. Last night there was a miserable little hut standing there, and today there is a beautiful new house. Run over and see what has come to pass." So his wife went and asked the poor man, and he said to her, "Yesterday evening a traveler came here and asked for a night's lodging, and this morning when he took leave of us he granted us 3 wishes: eternal happiness, health during this life, and our daily bread as well, and besides this, a beautiful new house instead of our old hut." When the rich man's wife heard this, she ran back in haste and told her husband how it had happened. The man said, "I could tear myself to pieces if I had but known that. That traveler came to our house, too, and wanted to sleep here, and I sent him away." "Quick," said his wife. "Get on your horse. You can still catch the man up, and then you must ask to have 3 wishes granted you." The rich man followed the good counsel and galloped away on his horse, and soon came up with the Lord. He spoke to him softly and pleasantly, and begged him not to take it amiss that he had not let him in directly. He was looking for the front door key, and in the meantime the stranger had gone away. If he returned the same way, he must come and stay with him. "Yes," said the Lord, "if I ever come back again, I will do so." Then the rich man asked if might not wish for 3 things too, as his neighbor had done. "Yes," said the Lord, "he might, but it would not be to his advantage, and he had better not wish for anything." But the rich man thought that he could easily ask for something which would add to his happiness, if he only knew that it would be granted. So the Lord said to him, "Ride home then, and 3 wishes which you shall form shall be fulfilled." The rich man had now gained what he wanted, so he rode home, and began to consider what he should wish for. As he was thus thinking, he let the bridle fall, and the horse began to caper about, so that he was continually disturbed in his meditations, and could not collect his thoughts at all. He patted its neck and said, "Gently, Lisa," but the horse only began new tricks. Then at last he was angry and cried quite impatiently, "I wish your neck was broken." Directly he had said the words, down the horse fell on the ground, and there it lay dead and never moved again. And thus was his first wish fulfilled. As he was miserly by nature, he did not like to leave the harness lying there, so he cut it off and put it on his back, and now he had to go on foot. "But I have still 2 wishes left," said he, and comforted himself with that thought. And now, as he was walking slowly through the sand, and the sun was burning hot at noonday, he grew quite hot-tempered and angry. The saddle hurt his back, and he had not yet any idea what to wish for. If I were to wish for all the riches and treasures in the world, said he to himself, I should still think of all kinds of things later on, and I know that beforehand. But I still manage so that there is nothing at all left me to wish for afterwards. Then he sighed and said, if I were but that Bavarian peasant who likewise had 3 wishes granted to him, and knew quite well what to do, and in the first place wished for a great deal of beer, and in the second for as much beer as he was able to drink, and in the third for a barrel of beer into the bargain. Many a time he thought he had found it, but then it seemed to him to be, after all, too little. Then it came into his mind what an easy life his wife had, for she stayed at home in a cool room and enjoyed herself. This really did vex him, and before he was aware, he said, I just wish she was sitting there on this saddle and could not get off of it, instead of my having to drag it along my back. And as the last word was spoken, the saddle disappeared from his back, and he saw that his second wish had been fulfilled. Then he really did feel warm. He began to run and wanted to be quite alone in his room at home, to think of something really large for his last wish. But when he arrived there and opened the parlor door, he saw his wife sitting in the middle of the room on the saddle, crying and complaining and quite unable to get off of it. So he said, Do bear it, and I will wish for all the riches on earth for thee, only stay where thou art. She, however, called him a fool and said, What good will all the riches on earth do me if I am to sit on this saddle? Thou hast wished me on it, so thou must help me off. So whether he would or not, he was forced to let his third wish be that she should be of quit of this saddle, and able to get off it, and immediately the wish was fulfilled. So he got nothing by it but vexation, trouble, abuse, and the loss of his horse. But the poor people lived happily, quietly, and piously until their happy death. Ah, yes, the very classic "Be careful what you wish for" story. We do love a good "Be careful what you wish for" story. I mean, that's kind of how it goes, though, to be fair. There's always one in every story. He is an asshole, correct. All right, what do we got next? Louisa Baldwin. Oh, this one looks interesting. This is told from a first-person perspective, so let's see how this one goes. My only wish is for a crisp high five. Fucking wild.
My name is Steve, and I'm addicted.
All right. Let me see if I can get here. Okay. All right. Next story. So, I don't know anything about this story. It doesn't sound familiar, but it's first person, so let's go. Okay. And 3, 2, and 1. How He Left the Hotel by Louisa Baldwin. I used to work the passenger lift in the Empire Hotel, that big block building in lines of red and white brick like streaky bacon that stands at the corner of, street. I'd served my time in the Army and got my discharge with good conduct stripes, and how I got the job was in this way. The hotel was a big company affair with a managing committee of retired officers and such like, gentlemen with a bit of money in the concern, and nothing to do but fidget about it, and my late colonel was one of 'em. He was as good-tempered as a man as ever stepped in when his will wasn't crossed, and when I asked him for a job, "Mole," says he, "you're the very man to work the lift at our big hotel. Soldiers are civil and businesslike, and the public like 'em only second best to sailors. We've had to give our last man in the sack, and you could take his place." I liked my work well enough and my pay, and kept my place a year, and I should have been there still if it hadn't been for a circumstance. But don't let me anticipate. Ours was a hydraulic lift. None of them rickety things swung up like a pole parrot's cage in a well staircase that I shouldn't care to trust my neck to. It ran as smooth as oil. A child might have worked it, and safe as standing on the ground. Instead of being stuck full of advertisements like an omnibus, we'd mirrors in it, and the ladies would look at themselves and pat their hair and set their mouths when I was taking 'em downstairs dressed of an evening. It was a little sitting room with red velvet cushions to sit down on, and you'd nothing to do but get into it, and it'd float you up to float you down light as a bird. All the visitors used to lift one time or another, going up or coming down. Most of them was French, and they called the lift the ascenseur, and good enough for them in their language, no doubt. But why the Americans, that can speak English when they choose and are always finding out ways of doing things quicker than other folks, should waste their time and breath calling a lift an elevator, I can't make out. I was in charge of the lift from noon to midnight. By the time that theater and dining out folks had come in, and anyone returning late walked upstairs, for my day's work was done. One of the porters worked that lift till I come on duty in the morning, but before 12 there was nothing particular going on, and not much till after 2 o'clock. Then it was pretty hot work with visitors going up and down constant, and the electric bell ringing you from one floor to another like a house on fire. Then came a quiet spill while dinner was on, and I'd sit down comfortable in the lift and read my paper. Only I mightn't smoke, but nobody else might neither, and I had to ask furrin gentlemen to please not smoke in it. It was against the rules. I hadn't so often to tell English gentlemen. They're not like furners that seem as if their cigar was glued to their lips. I always noticed faces as folks got into the lift, for I've sharp sight and a good memory, and none of the visitors needed to tell me twice where to take them. I knew them, and I knew their floor as well as they did themselves. It was in November that Colonel Saxby came to the Empire Hotel. I noticed him particularly because you could see at once that he was a soldier. He was a tall, thin man about 50, with a hawk nose, keen eyes, and a gray mustache, and walked stiff from a gunshot wound in the knee. But what I noted... A gunshot wound in the knee. There's an arrow to the knee joke. I'm so sorry. I'm bad. I'm terrible. But what I know... I'm so sorry. Where was I? Okay, wait. I'll start back over. Hold on. Okay. But what I noticed most was the scar of a saber cut across the right side of his face. As he got into the lift to go to his room on the 4th floor, I thought what a difference there is among officers. Colonel Saxby put me in mind of a telegraph post for height and thinness, and my old colonel was like a barrel in uniform, but a brave soldier and a gentleman all the same. Colonel Saxby's room was number 210, just opposite the glass door leading to the lift, and every time I stopped on the 4th floor, number 210 stared me in the face. The colonel used to go up in the lift every day regular, though he never came down in it but I'm coming to that presently. Sometimes when he was alone in the lift, he'd speak to me. He asked me in what regiment I had served and said he knew the officers in it, but I can't say he was comfortable enough to talk to. There was something stand-off about him, and he always seemed deep in his own thoughts. He never sat down in the lift. Whether it was empty or full, he stood bolt upright under the lamp, where the light fell on his pale face and scarred cheek. One day in February, I didn't take the colonel up in the lift, and as he was regular as clockwork, I noticed it. But I supposed he'd gone away for a few days, and I thought no more about it. Whenever I stopped on the 4th floor of the door of 210 being shut, and, as he often left it open, I made sure the colonel was away. At the end of a week, I heard a chambermaid say that Colonel Saxby was ill, So, thinks I, that's why he hasn't been in the lift lately. It was a Tuesday night, and I'd had an uncommonly busy time of it. It was one stream of traffic up and down, and so it went on the whole on evening. There's an extra on in there, hold on. It was one stream of traffic up and down, and so it went on the whole evening. It was on the strike of midnight, and I was able to put out the light in the lift, lock the door, and leave the key in the office for the man in the morning. When the electric bell rang out sharp, I looked at the dial and saw I was wanted on the 4th floor. It struck 12 as I stepped into the lift. As I passed the 2nd and 3rd floors, I wondered who it was that had rung so late, and thought it must be a stranger that didn't know the rule of the house. But when I stopped at the 4th floor and flung open the door of the lift, Colonel Saxby was standing there wrapped in a military cloak. The door of his room was shut behind him, for I read the number on it. I thought he was ill in his bed. And ill enough he looked, but he had his hat on, and what could a man that had been in bed 10 days want with going out on a winter midnight? I don't think he saw me, but when I'd set the lift in motion, I looked at him standing under the lamp, with the shadow of his hat hiding his eyes and the light full on the lower part of his face that was deadly pale, the scar on his cheek showing still paler. "Glad to see you're better, sir," said I. But he said nothing, and I didn't like to look at him again. He stood like a statue with his cloak about him, and I was downright glad when I opened the door to the lift for him to step out into the hall. I saluted as he got out, and he went past me toward the front door. "The colonel wants to go out," I said to the porter who stood staring, and he opened the door, and Colonel Saxby walked out into the snow. "That's a queer go," he said. "It is," said I. "I don't like the colonel's looks. He doesn't seem himself at all. He's ill enough to be in his bed, and there he is, gone out in the night like this." "Anyhow, he's got a famous cloak to keep him warm," I say, "supposing he's gone to a fancy ball and got that cloak on to hide his dress," said the porter, laughing uneasily, for we both felt queerer than we cared to say, and as we spoke there came a loud ring at the doorbell. "No more passengers for me," I said, and I was really putting the light out this time, when Joe opened the door and 2 gentlemen entered that I knew at a glance were doctors. One was tall and the other was short and stout, and they both came to the lift. "Sorry, gentlemen, but it's against the rule for the lift to go up after midnight." "Nonsense," said the stout gentleman. "It's only just past 12 and a matter of life and death. Take us up at once to the 4th floor." And they were in the lift like a shot. So up we went, and when I opened the door, they walked straight to number 10. A nurse came out to meet them, and the stout doctor said, "No change for the worse, I hope." And I heard her reply, "The patient died 5 minutes ago, sir." Though I'd no business to speak, that was more than I could stand. I followed the doctors to the door and said, "There's some mistake here, gentlemen. I took the colonel down in the lift. The clock struck 12 and he went out." The stout doctor said sharply, "A case of mistaken identity. It was someone else you took down for the colonel." "Begging your pardon, gentlemen, it was the colonel himself, and the night porter that opened the front door for him knew him as well as me. He was dressed for a night like this with his military cloak wrapped around him." "Step in and see for yourself," said the nurse. I followed the doctor into the room, and there lay Colonel Saxby, looking just as I had seen him a few minutes before. There he lay, dead as his forefathers, and the great cloak spread over the bed to keep him warm, that would feel heat and cold no more. I never slept that night. I sat up with Joe, expecting every minute to hear the colonel ring the front doorbell. Next day, every time the bell rang for the lift, sharp and sudden, the sweat broke out on me and I shook again. I felt as bad as I did the first time I was in action. Me and Joe told the manager all about it, and he said we'd been dreaming, but said he, "Mind you don't talk about it, or the house will be empty in a week." The colonel's coffin was smuggled into the house the next night. Me and the manager and the undertaker's men took it up in the lift, and it lay right across it, and not an inch to spare. They carried it into number 210, and while I waited for them to come out again, a queer feeling came over me. Then the door opened softly, and 4 men carried out the long coffin straight across the passage, and set it down with its foot towards the door of the lift, and the manager looked round for me. "I can't do it, sir," I said. "I can't take the colonel down again. I took him down at midnight yesterday, and that was enough for me." "Push it in,"
said the manager, speaking short and sharp, and they ran to the coffin and to the lift without a sound. The manager got in last, and before he closed the door, he said, "Mo, you've worked this lift for the last time, it strikes me." And I had, for I wouldn't have stayed on at the Empire Hotel after what had happened. Not if they'd doubled my wages and me and the night porter left together. That was almost like a camp scary story. That was very it was a camp scary story almost. It's interesting. Get Colonel Sanders. Dead ass. It was Colonel Sanders all along. All right, let's see what we got. Oh, this one will be quick. So this will be the last story that I'm going to narrate right now, which is good for me. This one is a Charles Dickens piece. So interesting. Let me go ahead and update this really quick here. Yeah, it was very like you tell it around the campfire type story, I think. I think this one is a little kinder of a story because again, it's Dickens, so it's going to be pretty. Get your mouth around it. Oh, you saw the recent episode? I'm so proud of you. Listen, the fucking the Easter Bunny episode of Rick and Morty that was just released was not. That was insane. Anyway, all right, we're getting back to it. Getting back to it.
A Child's Dream of a Star by Charles Dickens. There was once a child, and he strolled about a good deal and thought of a number of things. He had a sister who was a child too, and his constant companion. These two used to wonder all day long. They wondered at the beauty of the flowers. They wondered at the height and blueness of the sky. They wondered at the depth of the bright water. They wondered at the goodness and the power of God who made the lovely world. They used to say to one another, sometimes, supposing all the children upon earth were to die, would the flowers and the water and the sky be sorry? They believed they would be sorry, for said they, the buds are the children of the flowers, and the little playful streams that gambol down the hillsides are the children of the water, and the smallest bright specks playing at hide-and-seek in the sky all night must surely be the children of the stars, and they would all be grieved to see their playmates, the children of men, no more. There was one clear, shining star that used to come out in the sky before the rest, near the church spire, above the graves. It was larger and more beautiful, they thought, than all the others, and every night they watched for it, standing hand in hand at a window. Whoever saw it first cried out, "I see the star!" And often they cried out both together, knowing so well when it would rise and where. So they grew to be such friends with it that, before lying down in their beds, they always looked out once again to bid it good night. And when they were turning round to sleep, they used to say, "God bless the star." But while she was still very young, oh, very, very young, the sister drooped and came to be so weak that she could no longer stand in the window at night, and when the child looked sadly out by himself, and when he saw the star, turned round and said to the patient, pale face on the bed, "I see the star," and then a smile would come upon the face, and a little weak voice used to say, "God bless my brother and the star." And so the time came all too soon, when the child looked out alone, and when there was no face on the bed, and when there was a little grave among the graves, not there before, and when the star made long rays down towards him, as he saw it through his tears. Now these rays were so bright, and they seemed to make such a shining way from earth to heaven, that when the child went to his solitary bed, he dreamed about the star, and dreamed that, lying where he was, he saw a train of people taken up that sparkling road by angels, and the star, opening, showed him a great world of light, where many more such angels waited to receive them. All these angels who were waiting turned their beaming eyes upon the people who were carried up into the star, and some came out from the long rows in which they stood, and fell upon the people's necks, and kissed them tenderly, and went away with them down avenues of light, and were so happy in their company that lying in his bed he wept for joy. But there were many angels who did not go with them, and among them one he knew. The patient face that once had lain upon the bed was glorified and radiant, but his heart found out his sister among all the host. His sister's angel lingered near the entrance of the star, and said to the leader among those who had brought the people thither, "Is my brother to come?" And he said, "No." She was turning hopefully away when the child stretched out his arms and cried, "Oh, sister, I am here. Take me." And then she turned her beaming eyes upon him, and it was night, and the star was shining into the room, making long rays down towards him as he saw it through his tears. From that hour forth, the child looked out upon the star as on the home he was to go to, when his time should come. And he thought that he did not belong to the earth alone, but to the star too, because of his sister's angel gone before. There was a baby born to be a brother to the child, and while he was so little that he never yet had spoken a word, he stretched his tiny form out on his bed and died. Again the child dreamed of the open star and the company of angels and the train of people and the row of angels with their beaming eyes all turned upon those people's faces. Said his sister's angel to the leader, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "Not that one, but another." As the child beheld his brother's angel in her arms, he cried, "Oh, sister, I'm here, take me." And she turned and smiled upon him, and the star was shining. He grew to be a young man, and was busy at his books when an old servant came to him and said, "Thy mother is no more. I bring her blessing on her darling son." Again, at night, he saw the star, and all that former company. Said his sister's angel to the leader, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "Thy mother." A mighty cry of joy went forth through all the star, because the mother was reunited to her two children, and he stretched out his arms and cried, "O mother, sister, and brother, I am here, take me." And they answered him, "Not yet." And the star was shining. He grew to be a man, whose hair was turning gray, and he was sitting in his chair by the fireside, heavy with grief, and with his face bedewed with tears, when the star opened once again. Said his sister's angel to the leader, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "Nay, but his maiden daughter." And the man who had been the child saw his daughter newly lost to him, a celestial creature among those three, and he said, "My daughter's head is on my sister's bosom, and her arm is around my mother's neck, and at her feet there is the baby of old time, and I can bear the parting from her. God be praised." And the star was shining. Thus the child came to be an old man, and his once smooth face was wrinkled, and his steps were slow and feeble, and his back was bent. And one night, as he lay upon his bed, his children standing round, he cried, as he had cried so long ago, "I see the star." They whispered one another, "He is dying." And he said, "I am. My age is falling from me like a garment, and I move towards the star." Oops. My age is falling from me like a garment, and I move toward the star as a child, and oh, my Father, now I thank thee that it has so often opened to receive those dear ones who await me. That was really sad, but not, it was like a happy sad. I don't know. I get it. I get it. Like in a good kind of way, but at the same time, you know, it was sweet. All right, let's see. So that one is good to go.
So let me go ahead and get this handled. Oops. I gotta save this folder really quick, so bear with me. Is it? Oh, I guess it is. And we want to save this as WAV files, and we want to save it as the right hertz and bits. Okay, that one is done. So this one, it looks like we have another Brothers Grimm, a John Kendrick Bangs story. Oh, two John Kendrick's stories. These are all interesting. So these are all really classic reads, it looks like, that I've got left, which is kind of fascinating. Yeah, it was really dark, but it was also kind of like, I don't know, maybe it was just me. It seemed like it was very, very sweet, like it was meant to be. So that's not so bad. I guess that's the garbage, probably. As the dogs are barking. That's cool. Hey, Davin, how are you? Okay, I'm giving the dogs a second to settle. Let me see how much I've got left, because maybe I'll just stay and get the rest of these done. So the Brothers Grimm story is about 5 pages. And then the Bang stories 6, and the other one's 13. But it's almost written like a prose poem. Very strange. Sherlock is doing well. He's napping. No, it's not B-Guy. Thankfully. Okay. Well, we might as well, I guess, just get this done. And they've calmed down now, so that's fine by me. Okay. Yeah, we'll just do it. It's fine. All right, next story. I do find it particularly interesting that they have moved on to utilizing classic stories. Okay, so we are moving on. Oh, thanks, Davin. I appreciate that. We're moving on to another Brothers Grimm story. So we'll do that. I said what I said, Ellis. These are awfully old classics coming from the Brothers Grimm and Lovecraft. So just interesting choices, I think. The True Bride by the Brothers Grimm. There was once on a time a girl who was young and beautiful, but she had lost her mother when she was quite a child, and her stepmother did all she could to make the girl's life wretched. Whenever this woman gave her anything to do, she worked at it in... What fucking word is that? Hold on. Listen, I admit a lot of things, a lot of ways, a lot of times. I have never seen this word on God in my life. So hold on 2 seconds, because I have no fucking clue what it is. Control C, Control V. Oh, are we not? Indefatigably? What fucking indefatigably? Persisting tirelessly.
Indefatigable.
Indefatigably. That's fascinating. I've never seen that word before. Okay. I learned a new word today. I guess we all learned a new word today. Indefatigably.
What fucking...
Indefatigably.
Whenever this woman...
Okay. All right. Well, whatever. Indefatigably. Whenever this woman gave her anything to do, she worked at it indefatigably and did everything that lay in her power. Still, she could not touch the heart of the wicked woman by that. She was never satisfied. It was never enough. The harder the girl worked, the more work was put upon her, and all that the woman thought of was how to weigh her down with still heavier burdens and make her life still more miserable. One day she said to her, "Here are 12 pounds of feathers which thou must pick, and if they are not done this evening, thou mayst expect a good beating. Dost thou imagine thou art to idle away the whole day?" The girl sat down to the work, but tears ran down her cheeks as she did so, for she saw plainly enough that it was quite impossible to finish the work in one day. Whenever she had a little heap of feathers lying before her, and she sighed or smote her hands together in her anguish, they flew away, and she had to pick them out again and begin her work anew. Then she put her elbows on the table, laid her face in her 2 hands, and cried, "Is there no one, then, on God's earth to have pity on me?" Then she heard a low voice which said, "Be comforted, my child. I have come to help thee." The maiden looked up, and an old woman was by her side. She took the girl kindly by the hand and said, "Only tell me what is troubling thee." As she spoke so kindly, the girl told her of her miserable life, and how one burden after another was laid upon her, and she could never get to the end of the work which was given to her. "If I have not done these feathers by this evening, my stepmother will beat me. She has threatened. She will, and I know she keeps her word." Her tears began to flow again, but the good old woman said, "Do not be afraid, my child. Rest a while, and in the meantime I will look to thy work." The girl lay down on her bed and soon fell asleep. The old woman seated herself at the table with the feathers, and how they did fly off the quills, which she scarcely touched with her withered hands. The 12 pounds were soon finished, and when the girl awoke, great snow-white heaps were lying piled up, and everything in the room was neatly cleared away, but the old woman had vanished. The maiden thanked God and sat still till evening came, when the stepmother came in and marveled to see the work completed. "Just look, you awkward creature," said she. "What can be done when people are industrious, and why couldst thou not set about something else? There thou sit with thy hands crossed." When she went out, she said, "The creature is worth more than her salt. I must give her work that is still harder." The next morning she called the girl and said, "There is a spoon for thee. With that thou must empty out for me the great pond which is beside the garden, and if it is not done by night, thou knowest what will happen." The girl took the spoon and saw that it was full of holes, but even if it had not been, she never could have emptied the pond with it. She set to work at once, knelt down by the water, into which her tears were falling, and began to empty it. But the good old woman appeared again, and when she learnt the cause of her grief, she said, "Be of good cheer, my child. Go into the thicket and lie down and sleep. I will soon do thy work." As soon as the old woman was alone, she barely touched the pond, and a vapor rose up on high from the water and mingled itself with the clouds. Gradually the pond was emptied, and when the maiden awoke before sunset and came thither, she saw nothing but the fish which were struggling in the mud. She went to her stepmother and showed her that the work was done. That sounds like the garbage. Yeah, I hear a heavy truck. Okay, we're gonna have to pause for a second because that's the garbage truck. What emoji is that? I don't know what emoji that is, but I like it. Yeah. We're working on it. Just waiting for the garbage so that that can clear. This is actually a good time for me to rest my voice for a split second, though. Oh, my hands are... That's not good. My hands are swollen today. I didn't eat a lot of salt yesterday.
Oh, yeah, no. I was gonna say, that's not mine. I need to add some more, though. I definitely need some more emotes. This is gonna take a few minutes. Yeah, it's gonna take a few minutes. That's okay. Hey, Jackson. Cough your lungs out and wash them with a hose. That's so rude. Let's fucking go! Thanks for the 40 bits, Ray. I appreciate that. Actually, I guess I can move. I can move them like right here. It's fine. Today is garbage day, right? It's Wednesday? I think it's garbage day. Okay. Yeah, they've been coming because they used to come really, really early. The garbage used to show up at like like 9, and now yeah, it started running really, really late. We're gonna get back to reading in just a second though, because I really want to finish at least one more drive and get relatively caught up. Okay, well, while we wait, I'm gonna put the link for April stories. And of course, we do have our regular gaming stream tomorrow. I'm gonna start working on workout streams as well. I need to find a thing of regular dumbbells. I currently do not have I currently don't have any. Like, I have the adjustable dumbbells, but when I'm doing a superset for something, it's kind of a pain in the ass. So, but hopefully I will have my gym set up and you guys can start hanging out in the mornings for workout streams. I gotta figure out the music situation for that, though. Fucking bee guy. Soup. It's always soup. Okay. Are we... Now it's quiet. Are we done? Are we done barking? Was it not the garbage? I definitely thought that was the garbage. Bee guy is part of my deep lore. Ah, and now the pipe cleaner's awake. Fantastic. Okay.
She went to her stepmother and showed her that the work was done.
Okay. All right, back to it.
It ought to have been done long before this, said she, and grew white with anger. But she meditated something new. On the third morning, she said to the girl, "Thou must build me a castle on the plain there, and it must be ready by the evening." The maiden was dismayed and said, "How can I complete such a great work?" "I will endure no opposition," screamed the stepmother. "If thou canst empty a pond with a spoon that is full of holes, thou canst build a castle too. I will take possession of it this very day, and if anything is wanting, even if it be the most trifling thing in the kitchen or cellar, thou knowst what lies before thee."
That actually was well timed because I was yelling anyway, so. I can't tell what he's mad about. Are we done? Ah, that is the garbage. Okay. I think they just paused at the bottom of the road. All right. Yeah. There we go. So now I'm going to give it a minute. I like how you guys need... I feel like I need like a copy-paste dissertation on the lore of Bee Guy.
All right, we'll give it a second to let them calm down. Well, so the dogs in this case, because I'm trying to record, need not to bark, but I'm 99% sure. I don't know. I think it's really, really weird, personally. Some of these, you got to realize too, so some of these have been copied into Word docs. So I'm not exactly sure where they're being sourced. Oh, it was B Guy? It was B Guy? Fucker. Kiss my ass. Ellis, I need you to type up like this really like short, stupid kind of like campfire tale version of the B Guy lore, and I'm gonna turn it into a fucking command. I swear to God. And then I need art of the B Guy bullshit. All right, anyway. Okay, back to it. She drove the girl out, and when she entered the valley, the rocks were there, piled up one above the other, and all her strength would not have enabled her even to move the very smallest of them. She sat down and wept, and still she hoped the old woman would help her. The old woman was not long in coming. She comforted her and said, "Lie down there in the shade and sleep, and I will soon build the castle for thee, if it would be a pleasure to thee. Thou canst live in it thyself." When the maiden had gone away, the old woman touched the grey rocks. They began to rise and immediately moved together as if giants had built the walls, and on these buildings they arose, and it seemed as if countless hands were working invisibly and placing one stone upon another. There was a dull, heavy noise from the ground. Pillars arose of their own accord on high and placed themselves in order near each other. The tiles laid themselves in order on the roof, and when noonday came, the great weathercock was already turning itself on the summit of the tower, like a golden figure of the Virgin with fluttering garments. The inside of the castle was being finished, while evening was drawing near. How the old woman managed it, I know not. But the walls of the rooms were hung with silk and velvet. Embroidered chairs were there, and richly ornamented armchairs by marble tables. Crystal chandeliers hung down from the ceilings and mirrored themselves in the smooth pavement. Green parrots were there in gilt cages, and so were strange birds which sang most beautifully. And there was on all sides as much magnificence, as if a king were going to live there. The sun was just setting when the girl awoke, and the brightness of 1,000 lights flashed in her face. She hurried to the castle and entered by the open door. The steps were spread with red cloth, and the golden balustrade beset with flowering trees. When she saw the splendor of the apartment, she stood as if turned to stone. Who knows how long she might have stood there if she had not remembered the stepmother? "Alas," she said to herself, "if she could not be satisfied at last, and would give up making my life a misery to me." The girl went and told her that the castle was ready. "I will move into it at once," said she, and rose from her seat. When they entered the castle, she was forced to hold her hand before her eyes. The brilliancy of everything was so dazzling. "Thou seest," said she to the girl, "how easy it has been for thee to do this. I ought to have given thee something harder." She went through all the rooms and examined every corner to see if anything was wanting or defective, but she could discover nothing. "Now we will go down below," said she, looking at the girl with malicious eyes. "The kitchen and the cellar still have to be examined, and if thou hast forgotten anything, thou shalt not escape thy punishment." But the fire was burning on the hearth. I know that word's wrong. But the fire was burning on the hearth, and the meat was cooking in the pans. The tongs and shovels were leaning against the wall, and the shining brazen utensils all arranged in sight. Nothing was wanting, not even a coal box and water pail. "Which is the way to the cellar?" she cried. "If that is not abundantly filled, it shall go ill with thee." She herself raised up the trap-door and descended, but she had hardly made 2 steps before the heavy trap-door, which was only laid back, fell down. The girl heard a scream, lifted up the door very quickly to go to her aid, but she had fallen down, and the girl found her lying lifeless at the bottom. And now the magnificent castle belonged to the girl alone. She at first did not know how to reconcile herself to her good fortune. Beautiful dresses were hanging in the wardrobes. The chests were filled with gold or silver, or with pearls and jewels, and she never felt a desire that she was not able to gratify. And soon the fame of the beauty and riches of the maiden went over all the world. Wooers presented themselves daily, but none pleased her. At length the son of the king came, and he knew how to touch her heart, and she betrothed herself to him. In the garden of the castle was a lime tree, under which they were one day sitting together when he said to her, "I will go home and obtain my father's consent to our marriage. I will entreat thee to wait for me here under this lime tree. I shall be back with thee in a few hours." The maiden kissed him on his left cheek and said, "Keep true to me, and never let anyone else kiss thee on this cheek. I will wait here under the lime tree until thou returnest." The maid stayed beneath the lime tree until sunset, but he did not return. She sat 3 days from morning till evening, waiting for him, but in vain. As he still was not there by the 4th day, she said, "Some accident has assuredly befallen him. I will go out and seek him, and will not come back until I have found him." She packed up 3 of her most beautiful dresses, one embroidered with bright stars, the second with silver moons, the third with golden suns, tied up a handful of jewels in her handkerchief, and set out. She inquired everywhere for her betrothed, but no one had seen him. No one knew anything about him. Far and wide did she wander through the world, but she found him not. At last she hired herself to a farmer as a cowherd, and buried her dresses and jewels beneath a stone. And now she lived as a herdswoman, guarded her herd, and was very sad and full of longing for her beloved one. She had a little calf which she taught to know her, and fed it out of her own hand, and when she said, little calf, kneel by my side, and do not forget thy shepherd maid, as the prince forgot his betrothed bride, who waited for him neath the lime tree's shade." The little calf knelt down, and she stroked it. And when she had lived for a couple of years alone and full of grief, a report was spread over all the land that the king's daughter was about to celebrate her marriage. The road to the town passed through the village where the maiden was living, and it came to pass that once the maiden was driving out her herd, her bridegroom traveled by. He was sitting proudly on his horse and never looked round, but when she saw him, she recognized her beloved, and it was just as if a sharp knife had pierced her heart. "Alas," said she, "I believed him true to me, but he has forgotten me." Next day he again came along the road. When he was near her, she said to the little calf, little calf, kneel by my side, and do not forget thy shepherd maid, as the prince forgot his betrothed bride, who waited for him neath the lime tree's shade." When he was aware of the voice, he looked down and reined in his horse. He looked into the herd's face, and then put his hands before his eyes as if he were trying to remember something, but he soon rode onwards and was out of sight. "Alas," said she, "he no longer knows me," and her grief was greater. Soon after this, a great festival, 3 days long, was to be held at the king's court, and the whole country was invited to it. "Now will I try my last chance," thought the maiden, and when evening came, she went to the stone under which she had buried her treasures. She took out the dress with the golden suns, put it on, and adorned herself with the jewels. She let down her hair, which she had concealed under a handkerchief, and it fell down in long curls about her, and thus she went into the town, and in the darkness was observed by no one. When she entered the brightly lighted halls, everyone... 2 seconds. I forgot to turn that off. When she entered the brightly lighted hall, everyone stared back in amazement, but no one knew who she was. The king's son went to meet her, but he did not recognize her. He led her out to dance, and was so enchanted with her beauty that he thought no more of the other bride. When the feast was over, she vanished in the crowd, and hastened before daybreak to the village, where she once more put on her herd's dress. Next evening she took out the dress with the silver moons, and put a half-moon made of precious stones in her hair. When she appeared at the festival, all eyes were turned upon her. But the king's son hastened to meet her, and filled with love for her, danced with her alone, and no longer so much as glanced at anyone else. Before she went away, she was forced to promise him to come again to the festival on the last evening. When she appeared for the third time, she wore the star dress which sparkled at every step she took, and her hair ribbon and girdle were starred with jewels. The prince had already been waiting for her for a long time, and forced his way up to her. "Do but tell who thou art," said he. "I feel just as if I'd already known thee a long time." "Dost thou not know what I did when thou leftest me?" Then she stepped up to him and kissed him on his left cheek, and in a moment it was as if scales fell from his eyes, and he recognized the true bride. "Come," said he to her, "here I stay no longer," gave her his hand, and led her down to the carriage. The horses hurried away to the magic castle as if the wind had been harnessed to the carriage. The illuminated windows already shone in the distance. When they drove past the lime tree, countless glowworms were swarming about it. It shook its branches and sent forth their fragrance. On the steps flowers were blooming, and the room echoed with the song of strange birds. But in the hall the entire court was assembled, and the priest was waiting to marry the bridegroom to the true bride. Throw the whole man away. Throw the whole ass man away. Throw him away. That story made no sense. I'm proud of you, Brothers Grimm, but I'm not really understanding what exactly that story was supposed to amount to, and to be honest with you, fuck that guy. Also, where did the old woman go? Do we get no explanation for the old woman? I'm very confused. But it's fine, I guess. Good luck, get fucked. I don't know. That was strange. All right. Let's see. This one is 6 pages. Okay. It's like 5.5, sort of. It's fine. Ayo. All right. This one, I don't know anything about either. John Kendrick Bangs. I'm glad to hear it. That's what I'm here for. Yeah, listen, I understand it's a fairy tale, but like... All right, next one. A Physical Prank by John Kendrick Bangs. Willis had met Miss Hollister but once, and that, for a certain purpose, was sufficient. He was smitten. She represented in every way his ideal, although, until he had met her, his ideal had been something radically different. She was not at all Juno-esque, and the maiden of his dreams had been decidedly so. She had auburn hair, which hitherto Willis had detested. Indeed, if the same hirsute wealth had adorned some other woman's head, Willis would have called it red. This shows how completely he was smitten. She changed his point of view entirely. She shattered his old ideal and set herself up in its stead, and she did most of it with a smile. There was something, however, about Miss Hollister's eyes that contributed to the smiting of Willis's heart. They were great, round, lustrous orbs, and deep. So deep were they, and so penetrating, that Willis's affections were away beyond their own depth the moment Miss Hollister's eyes looked into his, and at the same time he had a dim and slightly uncomfortable notion that she could read every thought his mind held within its folds. Or rather, that she could see how utterly devoid of thought that mind was upon this ecstatic occasion, for Willis's brain was set all agog by the sensations of the moment. By Jove, he said to himself afterwards, for Willis, wise man that he could be on occasions, was his own confidant, to the exclusion of all others. By Jove, I believe she can peer into my very soul, and if she can, my hopes are blasted, for she must be able to see that a soul like mine is no more worthy to become the affinity of one like hers than a mountain reel can hope to rival the Amazon. Nevertheless, Willis did hope. Something may turn up, and perhaps I can devise some scheme by means of which my imperfections can be hidden from her. Maybe I can put stained glass over the windows of my soul and keep her from looking through them at my shortcomings. Smoked glasses, perhaps. And why not? If smoked glasses can be used by mortals gazing at the sun, why may they not be used by me when gazing into those scarcely less glorious orbs of hers? Alas for Willis, the fates were against him. A far-off tribe of fates were in league to blast his chances of success forever, and this is how it happened. Willis had occasion one afternoon to come uptown early. At the corner of Broadway and Astor Place, he entered a Madison Avenue car, paid his fare, and sat down in one of the corner seats at the rear end of the car. His mind was, as usual, intent upon the glorious Miss Hollister. Surely no one who had once met her could do otherwise than think of her constantly, he reflected, and the reflection made him a bit jealous. What business had others to think of her? Impertinent, groveling mortals. No man was good enough to do that. No, not even himself. But he could change. He could at least try to be worthy of thinking about her, and he knew of no other man who could. He'd like to catch anyone else doing so little as mentioning her name. Impertinent, groveling mortals, he repeated. And then the car stopped at 17th Street, and who should step on board but Miss Hollister herself. The idea, thought Willis. By Jove, there she is, on a horse car, too. How atrocious. One might as well expect to see Minerva driving in a grocer's wagon as Miss Hollister is in a horse car. Miserable, untactful world to compel Minerva to ride in a horse cart, or rather Miss Hollister to ride in a grocer's cart. Absurdest of absurdities. Here he raised his hat, for Miss Hollister had bowed sweetly to him as she passed on to the far end of the car, where she stood hanging on to a strap. I wonder why she doesn't sit down, thought Willis. For as he looked about the car, he observed that the exception of the one he occupied, all the seats were vacant. In fact, the only persons on board were Miss Hollister, the driver, the conductor, and himself. I think I'll go speak to her, he thought. And then he thought again. No, I'd better not. She saw me when she entered, and if she had wished to speak to me, she would have sat down here beside me, or opposite me, perhaps. I shall show myself worthy of her by not thrusting my presence upon her. But I wonder why she stands. She looks tired enough. Here Miss Hollister indulged in a very singular performance. She bowed her head slightly at someone, apparently on the sidewalk, Willis thought, murmured something, the purport of which Willis could not catch, and sat down in the middle of the seat on the other side of the car, which, looking very much annoyed, in fact, almost unamiable. Willis was more mystified than ever. But his mystification was as nothing compared to his anxiety when, on reaching 42nd Street, Miss Hollister arose and swept by him without a sign of recognition, left the car. Cut by thunder, ejaculated Willis in consternation. And why, I wonder? Most incomprehensible affair. Can she be a woman of whims with eyes like those? Never. Impossible. And yet, what else can she be the matter? Try as he might, Willis could not solve the problem. It was utterly past solution as far as he was concerned. I'll find out, and I'll find out like a brave man, he said, after racking his brains for an hour or two in a vain endeavor to get at the cause of Miss Hollister's cut. I'll call upon her tonight and ask her. He was true to his first purpose, but not to his second. He called, but he did not ask her, for Miss Hollister did not give him the chance to do so. Upon receiving his card, she sent down word that she was out. 2 days later, meeting him face to face upon the street, she gazed coldly at him and cut him once more. 6 months later, her engagement to a Boston man was announced, and in the autumn following, Miss Hollister of New York became Mrs. Barrows of Boston. There were cards, but Willis did not receive one of them. The cut was indeed complete and final. But why? That had now become one of the great problems of Willis's life. What had he done to be so badly treated? A year passed by, and Willis recovered from the dreadful blow to his hopes, but he often puzzled over Miss Hollister's singular behavior towards him. He had placed the matter before several of his friends, and, with the exception of one of them, none was more capable of solving his problem than he. This one had heard from his wife, a school friend and intimate acquaintance of Miss Hollister, now Mrs. Barrows, that Willis's ideal had once expressed herself to the effect that she had admired Willis very much until she had discovered that he was not always as courteous as he should be. "Courteous? Not as courteous I should be," retorted Willis. "When have I ever been anything else? Why, my dear Bronson," he added, "you know what my attitude towards womankind, as well as mankind, has always been. If there's a creature in the world whose politeness is his weakness, I am that creature. I'm the most courteous man living. When I play poker in my own rooms, I lose money because I've made it a rule never to beat my guests in cards or anything else." "That isn't politeness," said Bronson. "That's idiocy." "It proves my point," retorted Willis. "I'm polite to the verge of insanity. Not as courteous as I should be. Great Scott, what did I ever do to say to her to give that idea?" "I don't know," Bronson replied. "Better ask her. Maybe you overdid your politeness. Overdone courtesy is often worse than boorishness. You may have been so polite on some occasion that you made Miss Hollister think you considered her an inferior person. You know what that poet insinuated. Cirrhosis holds no fury like a woman condescended to by a man." "I've had half a mind to write to Mrs. Barrows and ask her what I did," said Willis. "That would be lovely," said Bronson. "Barrows would be pleased." "True, I never thought of that," replied Willis. "You are not a thoughtful thinker," said Bronson dryly. "If I were you, I'd bide my time, and someday you may get an explanation. Stranger things have happened, and my wife tells me that the Barrowses are to spend the coming winter in New York. You'll meet them out somewhere, no doubt." "No, I shall decline to go where they are. No woman shall cut me a second time, not even Mrs. Barrows," said Willis firmly. "Good. Stand by your colors," said Bronson with an amused smile. A week or two later, Willis received an invitation from Mr. and Mrs. Bronson to dine with them informally. "I have some very clever friends I want you to meet," she wrote, "so be sure to come." Willis went. The clever friends were Mr. and Mrs. Barrows, and, to the surprise of Willis, he was received most effusively by the quondam Miss Hollister. Why, Mr. Willis," she said, extending her hand to him. "How delightful to see you again." "Thank you," said Willis in some confusion. I am sure it is a very pleasant surprise for me. I had no idea." "Nor I," returned Mrs. Barrows. "And really, I should have been a little embarrassed, I think, had I known you to be here. Oh, it's so very absurd that I almost hesitate to speak of it, but I feel I must. I have treated you very badly." "Indeed," said Willis with a smile. "How, pray?" "Well, it wasn't my fault, really," returned Mrs. Barrows. "But do you remember a little over a year ago my riding uptown on a horse car, a Madison Avenue car with you?" said Willis with an affection of reflection. "Let me see. Yes, I think I do. We were the only ones on board, I believe, and Here Mrs. Barrows laughed outright. "You thought we were the only ones on board, but we weren't. The car was crowded," she said. "Then I don't remember it," said Willis. "The only time I ever rode on a horse car with you, to my knowledge, was—" "I know. This was the occasion," interrupted Mrs. Barrows. "You sat in a corner at the rear end of the car when I entered, and I was very much put out with you because it remained for a stranger whom I had often seen and to whom I had, for reasons unknown even to myself, taken a deep aversion, to offer me his seat, and, what is more, compel me to take it." "I don't understand," said Willis. "We were alone on the car." "To your eyes we were, although at the time I did not know it. To my eyes, when I boarded it, the car was occupied by enough people to fill all the seats. You returned my bow as I entered, but did not offer me your seat. The stranger did, and while I tried to decline it, I was unable to do so. He was a man of about my own age, and had a most remarkable pair of eyes. There was no resisting them. His offer was a command, and as I rode along and thought of your sitting motionless at the end of the car, compelling me to stand and being indirectly responsible for my acceptance of courtesies from a total and disagreeable stranger, I became so very indignant with you that I passed you without recognition as soon as I could summon up the courage to leave. I could not understand why you, who had seemed to be the soul of politeness, should upon this occasion have failed to do not what I should exact from any man, but what I had reason to expect of you. But, Mrs. Barrows, remonstrated Willis, why should I give up a seat to a lady when there were 20 other seats unoccupied in the same car? There is no reason in the world why you should, replied Mrs. Barrows. But it was not until last winter that I discovered the trick that had been put upon us. Ah, said Willis. Trick? Yes, said Mrs. Barrows. It was a trick. The car was empty to your eyes, but crowded to mine. With the Whoa, okay. Listen, hold up, wait, what? With the astral bodies of the members of the Boston Theosophical Society. What? Roared Willis. It is just as I have said, replied Mrs. Barrows with a silvery laugh. They are all great friends of my husband's, and one night last winter he dined them at our house. And who do you suppose walked in first? Madame Blavatsky's ghost, suggested Willis with a grin. Not quite, returned Mrs. Barrows, but the horrible stranger of the horse car. And, do you know, he recalled the whole thing to my mind, assuring me that he and the others had projected their astral bodies over to New York for a week, and had a magnificent time unperceived by all save myself, who was unconsciously psychic, and so able to perceive them in their invisible forms. It was a mean trick on me, Mrs. Barrows, said Willis ruefully, as soon as he had recovered sufficiently from his surprise to speak. Oh, no, she replied, with a repetition of her charming laugh, which re-aroused in Willis's breast all the regrets of a lost cause. They didn't intend it, especially for you, anyhow. Well, said Willis, I think they did. They were friends of your husband's, and they wanted to ruin me. Ruin you? And why should the friends of Mr. Barrows have wished to do that? Asked Mrs. Barrows in astonishment. Because, began Willis slowly and softly, because they probably knew that from the moment I met you, But that is a story with a disagreeable climax, Mrs. Barrows, so I shall not tell it. How do you like Boston? What? I'm sorry. Was this a story about an astral projection prank that a party of occult people decided to? You know what? I got nothing. Okay, sure, whatever. I got nothing on that one. That was very strange. Kendrick Banks's writing is very strange. Like, I get it. I see what happened, but at the same time, like, what? All right. Last story for this one. Yeah, that's kind of how it feels. Like plot twist. I think it was a plot twist. Plot twist. Plot twist. All right, next story. A Midnight Visitor by John Kendrick Bangs. I do not assert that what I am about to relate is in all its particulars absolutely true. Not, understand me, that it is not true, but I do not feel that I care to make an assertion that is more than likely to be perceived by a skeptical age with sneers of incredulity. I will content myself with a simple narration of the events of that evening, the memory of which is so indelibly impressed upon my mind, and which, were I able to do so, I should forget without any sentiments of regret whatsoever. The affair happened on the night before I fell ill of typhoid fever, and is about the sole remaining remembrance of that immediate period left to me. Briefly, the story is as follows. Notwithstanding the fact that I was overworked in the practice of my profession, it was early in March, and I was preparing my contributions for the coming Christmas issues of the periodicals for which I write. I had accepted the highly honorable position of entertainment committee man at one of the small clubs to which I belonged.
I accepted the office, supposing that the duties connected with it were easy of performance, and with absolutely no notion that the faith of my fellow committeemen, in my judgment, was so strong that they would ultimately manifest a desire to leave the whole program for the club's diversion in my hands. This, however, they did. And when the month of March assumed command of the calendar, I found myself utterly fagged out at my wits' end to know what style of entertainment to provide for the club meeting to be held on the evening of the 15th of that month. I had provided already an unusual taking variety of evenings, of which one in particular called the Martyr's Night. Okay. I thought I turned those off, but that's okay. I also thought that I turned my system settings. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, that's fine. I got it. It's fixed. 2 seconds. The Martyr's Night, in which living authors writhe through selections from their own works, while an inhuman audience, every man of whom had suffered even as the victims then suffered, sat on 10 score of camp stools, puffing the smoke of 25 score of free cigars into their faces, and gloating over their misery, was extremely successful, and it gained from me among my professional brethren the enviable title of Machiavelli Jr. This performance, in fact, was the one now on uppermost in the minds of the club members, having been the most recent of the series, and it had been prophesied by many men whose judgment was unassailable that no man, not even I, could ever conceive of anything that could surpass it. Disposed at first to question the accuracy of a prophecy to the effect that I was, like most others of my kind, possessed of limitations, I came finally to believe that perhaps, after all, these male Cassandras with whom I was thrown were right. Indeed, the more I racked my brains to think of something better than the Martyr's Night, the more I became convinced that in the achievement I had reached the zenith of my powers. The thing for me to do now was to hook myself securely onto the zenith and stay there. But how to do it? That was the question which drove sleep from my eyes and deprived me for a period of 6 weeks of my reason, my hair departing immediately upon the restoration thereof, a not uncommon after-symptom of typhoid. It was a typical March night, this one upon which the extraordinary incident about to be related took place. It was the kind of night that novelists use when they are handling a mystery that in the abstract would amount to nothing, but which in the concrete of a bit of wild, weird, and windy nocturnalism sends the reader into hysterics. It may be, I shall not attempt to deny it, that had it happened upon another kind of an evening, a soft, mild, balmy June evening, for instance, my own experience would have seemed less worthy of preservation in the amber of publicity, but of that the reader must judge for himself. The fact alone remains that upon the night when my uncanny visitor appeared, the weather department was apparently engaged in getting rid of its remnants. There was a large percentage of withering blast in the general makeup of the evening. There were rain and snow, which alternated in patterning upon my window pane and whitening the apology for a wold that stands 3 blocks from my flat on Madison Square. The wind whistled as it always does upon occasions of this sort. Is that the garbage? Listen, I just want to get through this man's weird-ass stories, because reading in this manner is definitely taxing. It's kind of interesting to see the different types of, yeah, I'm gonna need your business cards to be remade with male Cassandra. I'm not gonna lie to you right now. Yeah, so I'm not really sure where these stories came from, because again, these were sent to me to read for Chilling app, but I'm, it's interesting the different genre types, and how it's somewhat taxing to read certain styles over others, which is strange because from an emotional perspective, you'd expect first-person stories like Accounts for a Lonely Broadcast Station, right? You would think that those stories would be a lot more emotionally taxing, and they can be. I appreciate that, Tormuse. Thank you. It's definitely different. So we're just waiting for the dogs to finish. If that was B guy. Taxing in the sense that, like,
these are very wordy sentences. Like, not a lot of people do really long sentences much anymore in a lot of the writing, depending on what they're doing. Okay, that was the mail, so she'll be gone in just a second. And then we should be good to continue. They're just really long-winded sentences, and it can be kind of taxing to read. It's not a bad thing, it's just exhausting. So, god damn it, man. My chair's all fucked now. There we go. Okay, where did I leave off? Absolutely easy to stumble or lose rhythm. The wind whistled as it always... Okay. Back to it. The wind whistled as it always does upon occasions of this sort, and from all corners of my apartment, after the usual fashion, there seemed to come sounds of a supernatural order, the effect of which was to send cold chills off on their regular trips up and down the spine of their victim, in this instance, myself. I wished that at the time the hackneyed quality of these sensations had appealed to me. That it did not do so was shown by the highly nervous state in which I found myself as my clock struck 11. If I could only have realized at that hour that these symptoms were the same old threadbare premonitions of the appearance of a supernatural being, I should have left the house and gone to the club, and should have avoided the visitation then imminent. Had I done this, I should doubtless also have escaped the typhoid, since the doctors attributed that misfortune to the shock of my experience, which, in my then wearied state, I was unable to sustain, and what the escape of typhoid would have meant to me only those who have seen the bills of my physician and druggist for services rendered and prescriptions compounded are aware. That my mind unconsciously took thought of spirits was shown by the fact that when the first chill came upon me, I arose and poured out for myself a stiff bumper of old reserve rye, which I immediately swallowed. But beyond this I did not go. I simply sat there before my fire and cudgeled my brains for an idea whereby my fellow members at the Gutenberg Club might be amused. How long I sat there I do not know. It may have been 10 minutes. It may have been an hour. I was barely conscious of the passing of time, but I do know that the clock in the Dutch Reformed Church steeple at 29th Street and 5th Avenue was clanging out the first stroke of the hour of midnight when my doorbell rang. Theretofore, if I may be allowed the word, the tintinnabulation of my doorbell had been invariably pleasing unto me. I am fond of company, and company alone was betokened by its ring, since my creditors, gratifying their passion for interviews at my office, if perchance they happened to find me there. But on this occasion I could not at the moment tell why. Its clanging seemed the very essence of discord. It jangled with my nervous system. As it ceased, I was unconscious of a feeling of irritability, which is utterly at variance with my nature outside of business hours. In the office, for the sake of discipline, I frequently adopt a querulous manner, finding it necessary in dealing with office boys, but the moment I leave shop behind me, I become a different individual entirely, and have been called a moteless sunbeam by those who have seen not only that side of my character. This, by the way, must be regarded as a confidential communication, since I am at present engaged in preparing a vest-pocket edition of the philosophical works of Schopenhauer in words of one syllable. And were it known that the publisher had entrusted the magnificent pessimism of that illustrious juggler of words and theories to a moteless sunbeam, it might seriously interfere with the sale of the work. And I may say, too, that this request that my confidence be respected is entirely disinterested, inasmuch as I decline to do the work on the royalty plan, insisting upon the payment of lump sum, considerably in advance. But to return, I heard the bell ring with a sense of profound disgust. I did not wish to see anybody. My whiskey was low, my quinine pills few in number. My chills alone were present in a profusion bordering ostentation. I'll pretend not to hear it, I said to myself, resuming my work of gazing at the flickering light of my fire, which, by the way, was the only light in the room. Ting-a-ling-a-ling went the bell, as if in answer to my resolve. "Oh, confound the luck," I cried, jumping from my chair and going to the door with the intention of opening it, an intention, however, which was speedily abandoned, for as I approached it, a sickly fear came over me.
A sensation I had never before known seemed to take hold of my being, and instead of opening the door, I pushed the bolt to make it more secure. "There's a hint for you, whoever you are," I cried. "Do you hear that bolt slide, you?" I added, tremulously, for from the other side there came no reply, only a more violent ringing of the bell. "See here," I called out, as loudly as I could. "Who are you, anyhow? What do you want?" There was no answer, except from the bell, which began again. "Bell wire's too cheap to steal," I called again. "If you want wire, go buy it. Don't try to pull mine out. It isn't mine anyhow. It belongs to the house." Still there was no reply, only the clanging of the bell. And then my curiosity overcame my fear, and with a quick movement, I threw open the door. "Are you satisfied now?" I cried angrily. But I addressed an empty vestibule. There was absolutely no one there. And then I sat down on the mat and laughed. I never was so glad to see no one in my life. But my laugh was short-lived. What made that bell ring? I suddenly asked myself, and then the feeling of fear came upon me again. I gathered my somewhat shattered self together, sprang to my feet, slammed the door with such force that the corridors echoed to the sound, slid the bolt once more, turned the key, moved a heavy chair in front of it, and then fled like a frightened hare to the sideboard in my dining room. There I grasped the decanter holding my whiskey, seized a glass from the shelf, and started to pour out the usual dram, when the glass fell from my hand and was shivered into 1,000 pieces on the hardwood floor. For as I poured, I glanced through the open door, and therein my sanctum, the flicker of a random flame divulged the form of a being, the eyes of whom seemed fixed on mine, piercing me through and through. To say that I was petrified but dimly expresses the situation. I was granitized, and so I remained, until by a more luminous flicker of the burning wood I perceived that the being wore a flaring red necktie. He is human, I thought, and with the thought the tension on my nervous system relaxed, and I was able to feel a sufficiently well-developed sense of indignation to demand an explanation. "This is a mighty cool proceeding on your part," I said, leaving the sideboard and walking into the sanctum. "Yes," he replied, in a tone that made me jump. It was so extremely sepulchral, a tone that seemed as if it might have been acquired in a damp corner off some cave of the earth. But it's a cool evening. "I wonder that a man of your coolness doesn't hire himself out to some refrigerating company," I remarked, with a sneer which would have delighted the soul of Cassius himself. "I have thought of it," returned the being calmly, "but never went any further. Summer hotel proprietors have always outbid the refrigerating people, and they in turn have been laid low by millionaires who have hired me on occasion to freeze out people they didn't like, but who have persisted in calling. I must confess, though, my dear Hiram, that you are not much warmer yourself. This greeting is hardly what I expected." "Well, if you want to make me warmer," I retorted hotly, "just keep on calling me Hiram. How the deuce did you know that blot on my escutcheon anyway?" I added, for Hiram was one of the crimes of my family that I had tried to conceal, my parents having fastened the name of Hiram Spencer Carrington upon me at baptism for no reason other than that my rich bachelor uncle, who subsequently failed and became a charge upon me, was so named. "I was standing at the door of the church when you were baptized," returned the visitor, "and as you were an interesting baby, I have kept an eye on you ever since. Of course, I knew that you discarded Hiram as soon as you got old enough to put away childish things, and since the failure of your uncle, I have been aware that you desired to be known as Spencer Carrington. But to me you are, always have been, and always will be, Hiram." "Well, don't give it away," I pleaded. "I hope to be famous someday, and if the American newspaper paragrapher ever got hold of the fact that once in my life I was Hiram, I'd have to Hiram to let me alone." "That's a bad joke, Hiram," said the visitor, "and for that reason I like it, though I don't laugh. There is no danger of your becoming famous if you stick to humor of that sort." "Well, I'd like to know," I put in, my anger returning. "I'd like to know who in Brindisi you are, what in Cairo you want, and what in the name of the 17 hinges of the gates of Singapore you are doing here at this time of night." "When you were a baby, Hiram, you had blue eyes," said my visitor. "Bonny blue eyes, as the poet says." "What of it?" I asked. "This," replied my visitor. "If you have them now, you can very easily see what I am doing here. I am sitting down and talking to you." "Oh, are you?" I said with fine scorn. I had not observed that. The fact is, my eyes were so weakened by the brilliance of the necktie of yours that I doubt I could see anything, not even one of my own jokes. It's a scorcher, that tie of yours. In fact, I never saw anything so red in my life. I do not see why you complain of my tie, said the visitor. Your own is just as bad. Blue is never so withering as red, I retorted, at the same time caressing the scarf I wore. Perhaps, but not, If you will look in the glass, Hiram, you will observe that your point is not well taken, said my vis-a-vis calmly. I acted upon the suggestion and looked upon my reflection in the glass, lighting a match to facilitate the operation. I was horrified to observe that my beautiful blue tie, of which I was so proud, had in some manner changed, and was now of the same aggressive hue as that of my visitor, red even as a brick is red. To grasp it firmly in my hands and tear it from my neck was the work of a moment, and then in a spirit of rage I turned upon my companion. "See here," I cried. "I've had quite enough of you. I can't make you out, and I can't say that I want to. You know where the door is. You will oblige me by putting it to its proper use." "Sit down, Hiram," said he, "and don't be foolish and ungrateful. You are behaving in a most extraordinary fashion, destroying your clothing and acting like a madman generally. What was the use of ripping up a handsome tie like that?" "I despise loud hues. Red is a jockey's color," I answered. "But you did not destroy the red tie," said he with a smile. "You tore up your blue one. Look, there it is on the floor. The red one you still have on." The investigation showed the truth of my visitor's assertion. The flaunting streamer of anarchy still made my neck infamous, and before me on the floor, an almost unrecognizable mass of shreds, lay my cherished cerulean tie. The revelation stunned me. Tears came into my eyes and, trickling down over my cheeks, fairly hissed with the feverish heat of my flesh. My muscles relaxed, and I fell limp into my chair. "You need stimulant," said my visitor kindly. "Go, take a drop of your old reserve, and then come back here to me. I've something to say to you." "Will you join me?" I asked faintly. "No," returned the visitor. "I am so fond of whiskey that I never molest it. That act which is your stimulant is death to the rye. Never realized that, did you?" "No, I never did," I said meekly. "And bet you claimed to love it." "Bah!" he said. And then I obeyed his command, drained my glass to the dregs, and returned. "What is your mission?" I asked, when I had made myself as comfortable as was possible under the circumstances. "To relieve you of your woes," he said. "You're a homeopath, I observe," said I with a sneer. "You're a homeopath in theory and an allopath in practice." "I am not usually unintelligent," said he. "I fail to comprehend your meaning. Perhaps you express yourself badly." "I wish you'd express yourself for a different land," I retorted hotly. "What I mean is, you believe in the similacimnibus business, but you prescribe large doses. I don't believe troubles like mine can be cured on your plan. A man can't get rid of his stock by adding to it." "Oh, I see. You think I have added to your troubles." "I don't think so," I answered with a fond glance at my ruined tie. "I know so." "Well, wait until I have laid my plan before you, and see if you won't change your mind," said my visitor significantly. "All right," I said. "Proceed. Only hurry. I go to bed early, as a rule, and it's getting quite early now." "It's only 1 o'clock," said the visitor, ignoring the sarcasm. "But I will hasten, as I have several other calls to make before breakfast." "Are you a milkman?" I asked. "You are flippant," he replied. "But Hiram," he added, "I have come here to aid you in spite of your unworthiness. You want to know what to provide for your club night on the 15th. You want something that will knock the martyr's night silly." "Not exactly that," I replied. "I don't want anything so abominably good as to make all the other things I have done seem failures. That is not good business." "Would you like to be hailed as the discoverer of genius? Would you like to be the responsible agent for the greatest exhibition of skill in a certain direction ever seen? Would you like to become the most famous impresario the world has ever known?" Good timing to end that really quick. Hold on 2 seconds. Dogs are barking again. I don't know. I'm a little more into this story than the last one.
I believe you should narrate zoning codes and law books. Yeah, this is an interesting story. It's definitely it's a man so big, like, what's the word, behest? Man so behest by his fever. Like, you have to ask if he's imagining the whole thing or if he's literally being visited by like a really snotty spirit. I don't know. I'm kind of here for it. You know what's funny is I pick the middle of the day because usually it's quiet, and somehow, some way, it's not today. That is the garbage man. That is the garbage man. So we'll wait for him to pass. Hi, Jeff. B guy is stream sniping you? Oh my god. If I thought that motherfucker knew how to use a computer, he might. This is actually a good time to be right back. So I'm going to use the restroom really quick, and I will be right back. Okay, just waiting for the garbage to finish. That should be it. Almost done. Okay, back to it. Where did I leave off? Pretty sure that this guy was getting cussed. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Now, I said, forgetting my dignity under the enthusiasm with which I was inspired by my visitor's words, and infected more or less with his undoubtedly magnetite spirit. Now you're shouting. I thought so, Hiram. I thought so, and that's why I am here. I saw you on Wall Street today, and read your difficulty at once in your eyes, and I resolved to help you. I am a magician, and one or two little things have happened of late to make me wish to prestigitate in public. I knew you were after a show of some kind, and I've come to offer you my services. Oh, psh, I said. The members of the Gutenberg Club are men of brains, not children. Card tricks are hackneyed, and sleight of hand shows pall. Do they indeed? Said the visitor. Well, mine won't. If you don't believe it, I'll prove to you what I can do. I have no paraphernalia, I said. Well, I have, said he, and as he spoke, a pack of cards seemed to grow out of my hands.
I must have turned pale at this unexpected happening, for my visitor smiled and said, "Don't be frightened. That's only one of my tricks. Now choose a card." He added, "And when you have done so, toss the pack in the air. Don't tell me what the card is. It alone will fall to the floor." "Nonsense," said I. "It's impossible." "Do as I tell you." I did as he told me to a degree only. I tossed the cards in the air without choosing one, although I made a feint of doing so. Not a card fell back to the floor. They every one disappeared from view into the ceiling. If it had not been for the heavy chair I had rolled in front of the door, I think I should have fled. "How's that for a trick?" asked my visitor. I said nothing, for the very good reason that my words stuck in my throat. "Give me a little creme de menthe, will you, please?" said he after a moment's pause. "I haven't a drop in the house," I said, relieved to think that this wonderful being could come down to anything so earthly. "Hiram," he ejaculated, apparently in disgust. "Don't be mean, and above all, don't lie. Why, man, you've got a bottle full of it in your hand. Do you want it all?" He was right. Where it came from I do not know, but beyond question, the graceful, slim-necked bottle was in my right hand, and my left held a liqueur glass of exquisite form. "Say," I gasped as soon as I was able to collect my thoughts, "what are your terms?" "Wait a moment," he answered. "Let me do a little mind-reading before we arrange preliminaries." "I haven't much of a mind to read tonight," I answered wildly. "You're right there," said he. "It's like a dime novel, that mind of yours tonight. But I'll do the best I can with it. Suppose you think of your favorite poem, and after turning it over in your mind carefully for a few minutes, select 2 lines you like from it, concealing them, of course, from me, and I will tell you what they are." Now, my favorite poem, I regret to say, is Lewis Carroll's Jabberwock, a fact I was ashamed to confess to an utter stranger, so I tried to deceive him by thinking of some other lines. The effort was hardly successful, for the other lines I could call to mind at the moment were from Rudyard Kipling's rhyme, The Post That Fitted, in which ran, "Year by year in pious patience vengeful Mrs. Boffin sits, waiting for the Sleary babies to develop Sleary's fits." "Humph!" ejaculated my visitor. "You're a great Hiram, you are." And then rising from his chair and walking to my poet's corner, the magician selected 2 volumes. "There," said he, handing me the departmental ditties. "You'll find the lines you tried to fool me with at the foot of page 13. Look." I looked, and there lay that vile Sleary sentiment in all the majesty of type, staring me in the eyes. "And here," added my visitor, opening Alice in the Looking-Glass, "here is the poem that your mind holds all the philosophy of life. Come to my arms, my beamish boy, he chortled in his joy." I blushed and trembled, blushed that he should discover the weakness of my taste, trembled at his power. "I don't blame you for coloring," said the magician, "but I thought you said the Gutenberg was made up of okay men of brains. Do you think that you could stay on the rolls a month if they were aware that your poetic ideals are summed up in the Jabberwock and Sleary's fits?" "My taste might be far worse," I answered. "Yes, it might. You might have stooped to liking some of your own verses. I ought really to congratulate you, I suppose," retorted the visitor with a sneering laugh. This roused my ire again. "Who are you, anyhow, that you come here and take me to ask?" I demanded angrily. "I'll like anything I please, and without asking your permission. If I cared more for the Peterkin papers than I do for Shakespeare, I wouldn't be accountable to you, and that's all there is about it." "Never mind who I am," said the visitor. "Suffice to say that I am myself. You'll know my name soon enough. In fact, you will pronounce it involuntarily the first thing when you wake in the morning, and then—" Here he shook his head ominously, and I felt myself grow rigid with fright in my chair. "Now for the final trick," he said after a moment's pause. "Think of where you would most like to be at this moment, and I'll exert my power to put you there. Only close your eyes first." I closed my eyes and wished. When I opened them, I was in the billiard room of the Gutenberg Club with Perkins and Thompson. "For heaven's sake, Spencer," they said in surprise. Where did you drop in from? Why, man, you're white as a sheet. And what a necktie! Take it off. Grab hold of me, boys, and hold me fast, I pleaded, falling on my knees in terror. If you don't, I believe I'll die. The idea of returning to my sanctum was intolerably dreadful to me. Laughed the magician, for even as I spoke to Perkins and Thompson, I found myself seated opposite my infernal visitor in my room once more. They couldn't keep you an instant with me summoning you back. His laughter was terrible. His frown was pleasanter, and I felt myself gradually losing control of my senses. Go, I cried. Leave me, or you will have the crime of murder on your conscience. I have no he began, but I heard no more. That is the last I remember of that fearful night. I must have fainted, and then have fallen into a deep slumber. When I walked... That's what I thought. Okay, I'm so glad I was right. When I waked, it was morning, and I was alone, but undressed and in bed, unconscionably weak and surrounded by medicine bottles of many kinds. The clock on the mantel on the other side of the room indicated that it was after 10 o'clock. Great Beelzebub, I cried, taking note of the hour. I've an engagement with Barlow at 9. And then a sweet-faced woman, who I afterwards learned was a professional nurse, entered the room, and within an hour I realized two facts. One was that I had lain ill for many days, and that my engagement with Barlow was now for 6 weeks unfulfilled. The other, that my midnight visitor was none other than... And yet I don't know. His tricks certainly were worthy of that individual, but Perkins and Thompson's assert that I never entered the club that night, and surely if my visitor was Beelzebub himself, he would not have omitted so important a factor of success as my actual presence in the billiard room on that occasion would have been. And besides, he was altogether too cool to have come from his reputed residence. Altogether, I think the episode most unaccountable, particularly when I reflect that while no trace of my visitor was discoverable in my room the next morning, as my nurse tells me, my blue necktie was in reality found upon the floor, crushed and torn into a shapeless bundle of frayed rags. As for the club entertainment, I am told that despite my absence, it was a wonderful success, redeemed from failure, the treasurer of the club said, by voluntary services of a guest, who secured admittance on one of my cards and who executed some sleight-of-hand tricks that made the members tremble, and whose mind-reading feats performed on the club's butler not only made it necessary for him to resign his office, but disclosed to the House Committee the whereabouts of several cases of rare wines that had mysteriously disappeared. So, we are done with that one. Listen, I liked that story. Let me save it really quick. Hold on, and I'll read comments. Give me 2 seconds. Selfishly enough, I really liked that story, but I feel like that's also kind of a personal thing for me. Oh, hey, thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate you guys. I just saw that. Yo, what's up? Yeah, using the word ejaculate for as a I want to be clear, that's not meant in like the sexual way, but using the word ejaculate as a descriptor for saying something is fascinating to me, and I think it should come back. I think we need a comeback of the use of that word. I appreciate you. Hey, Steph. I do not have a shout out for Stephanie, but if you guys have not checked out Stephanie's work, Stephanie also narrates, does ASMR role plays, is a fun and phenomenal streamer to watch. Also games, so if you guys are kind, feel free to give a follow. Make sure that you do that. Appreciate you so much. That's what I'm saying, though. Like, he ejaculated. Like, wait. I don't think... That word means something different now than it did. I liked that story. I was suspicious that it was about a demon. About a quarter of the way through, when he started talking about how he showed up and the way that he spoke. We need a comeback. I'm just saying. You know who else needs a comeback? Venom needs a comeback. Venom needs a comeback. I'm just saying.
I haven't played Marvel Rivals in a long time, and listen, I need to play the Bubble Pop. I'm just saying. Okay, so that was May's stories. So that's good. So we are done officially with those 2 sets. And I believe I'm relatively caught up. And intelligibility is the only rule in English. I'm just saying. I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously there's a reason that word stopped being used, but I find it fascinating. I do. All right, let's see here. Okay. Perfect. Venom can absolutely come back. Venom can come back whenever he wants to. I know what I'm about. Okay, so that took care of that. I think we're pretty well caught up for now. Anything else that I can do? So I've reiterated this previously, and it's been well over like 7 years now, so I'm not really sure why it hasn't caught on. But polite reminder, Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station, according to the Reddit thread, like the no sleep thread for Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station, is and has been done for quite some time. There's only 3 parts. Right now, Kel Byron, who is the author, Windingus, has completed the first novel. It is available for sale, and has completed the second novel, and it is also available for sale. Mr. Creepypasta, myself, and Joey Sorless, who plays our Finn, completed the audiobook for the first book. The audiobook for the second book is pending right now because we do need to do a little bit of crowdfunding to be able to support that, as it is a bit costly, and I supported the first book out of my own pocket for us to be able to take care of it. So if you are looking for Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station, because I totally get why you'd want more, technically it's a 3-part series, and that third part is kind of where so far it has ended. So that's why there's nothing for that right now. But yeah. Okay, I'm done for now, guys. I have completed what needs to be completed. So I very much appreciate you guys for coming and hanging out while I narrated that stuff. My voice needs a break before I narrate some more. So I'm sure I will see you again. I do stream again tomorrow. Afternoon. I may do an early morning stream. I got to see about setting up everything for the workout and what I'm supposed to be doing for the workout, because if it's a leg day, I have to go to the gym. But if not, then I will see about working out tomorrow in my at-home gym and streaming it, since that was the in-game goal. But you guys are great. I will talk to you later. AutumnIvyOfficial.com. I've got some new releases coming this week, so make sure you don't miss them.